Recording. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Welcome to the Utility Advisory Board of River Falls meeting for March 25th, 2021. We'll start tonight with our roll call. If you could do that, Lenny.
Bernie. Morset.
Here.
Richter.
Here.
Spafford.
Here.
Swanson. Toon.
Here.
Wells Mangold.
Here.
Okay, moving on. We got the minutes from November of 2020. Way back then. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes, please?
I make a motion we approve the minutes from November 17 of 2020 and for the workshop and for the regular meeting on November 19.
Thank you, Scott.
I'll second that. Kellen.
Very good. All right.
Patrick, just
Go ahead.
a clarification. I think you announced it was March 25th, 2021 meeting tonight, and it is the March 15th meeting.
Okay. Yep. Well, if I did that, my apology. I was looking right at the 15, so
just in case someone's listening. Yep.
So, yep. Thank you. All right, we've got a motion and a second for approval. Can we all in favor say aye?
Aye.
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 Very good. All right. Moving on. Are there any public comments tonight? John?
Nope, there's nobody here.
Okay. I heard talk from William and I thought maybe. So, all right. Then what we'll do from there is we're gonna move the agenda around a little bit tonight. We've got two longer reports and we want to get them in early. So Kevin, help me out here.
Yes, I would certainly do that, Patrick. So our first one up, if you don't mind, Patrick, I'll just introduce Mike Peters. Is that okay?
That'd be fine. Yep.
Sure. Yeah. So we're lucky tonight we're fortunate to have Mike Peters. Mike is the president and CEO of WPPI Energy, and I know Mike likes to visit all 51 of the communities. And tonight he has joined us to give us a brief update about what's going on at WPPI Energy. And then maybe he might hit on a few other topics that have been kind of pressing lately to do with energy supply around the country and maybe a couple of other things as well. So, Mike, thanks for taking the time for joining us tonight. And Mike, before I let you go too, I think our key account manager from WPPI, Stacy Running, is also on the call tonight. So I want to acknowledge her as well. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to River Falls Municipal Utility. Obviously, I'd much prefer standing in front of you, but the technology that we have available does make this possible, and I do appreciate that opportunity. So the presentation I've got put together is probably 20 minutes, and then happy to answer any questions that you all might have. And please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation itself. Vicki is going to be running my slides for me. She's my administrative assistant. So right off the bat, WPPI is built around three primary responsibilities. And that goes hand in glove with what you all do as public power municipal utilities. And, the primary advantage that municipal utilities have, local control, and you're a great example of that. With the responsiveness that you're able to bring to your communities, affordable rates, without a doubt, municipal utilities invariably show having lower rates and a lot of times the lowest rates in a given state. And then strong reliability. Anytime there's an outage, municipal utilities are able to get the lines back up and the lights back on quicker than any other utility industry sector. And that's because you're local, your linemen live right there. They know the system like the back of their hand, and they're able to respond quickly. So the public power advantage is supported by what WPPI does. Next slide, Vicki. So we support you in really three major areas. Power supply is what we were created for. Programs and services, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those and how they dovetail with what you do with your customers. And then one piece that we can never lose sight of is policy advocacy. And with the both at the state and federal level. It's constantly an issue that we have to tend to, and I appreciate the support that River Falls provides in this area as well. Next slide. WPPI was created in 1980. Really, we were born out of a time where municipal utilities had very limited options for power supply. They either had their own resource, typically it was maybe a smaller, older coal plant, or possibly even hydro, as River Falls had a small hydro facility, or a diesel generator, or they bought from the investor-owned utility that surrounded their community. And that was really the only options that a municipal had. And so in the 1960s, 1970s, municipal utilities started seeing opportunities to band together and form larger organizations. And out of that, joint action agencies were created. If you look at the APPA membership, you can see a lot of joint action agencies that got created in the 1970s and 1980s, and WPPI was right there. We had 23 members initially that joined in 1980. Today, we're up to 51 members in 3 states. WPPI today has 112 employees, and we really do see ourselves as an extension of our member community's staff. We're behind the scenes helping you in any way we can deliver on your commitment to provide reliable, low-cost, reliable, environmentally responsible electric service to your customers, and we support you all in doing that. Collectively, WPPI member communities are come together, serve about 200,000 customers, and if you look at that, that gives us an economy of scale that no individual member of WPPI has. And so we're able to do things on a larger scale that allow you access to more cost-effective power supply resources, and then cutting-edge technology and services that you then offer to your member communities. And that last number on that slide, 1,050, that's the peak WPPI power supply that we reached. Our peak load back, I believe it was 2012, had a bit of a heat wave there. So we're about 1,000 megawatt utility. If you looked at us and compared us to the utilities generally in the state of Wisconsin, we're significantly larger than Madison Gas and Electric, MG&E, a smaller investor-owned utility. We're about 40% roughly of what Alliant is in the state of Wisconsin. So we're a decent sized utility, and that definitely allows us to do a lot of things to help our member communities. When you look at the governance structure of WPPI, we are truly member-owned, member-governed. We definitely rely on the activities and the input and the direction of our member communities, starting at the board of directors and right on down through the staff. When you look at our board, we have 51 board members, pretty large board. The major issues are reserved to the board, like approving our budget, approving our wholesale rate, approving any debt issuance that WPPI might pursue, buying an asset, and contract issues such as extending our member contract, which we did a few years ago, to most all of our members doing that. The board of directors elects an executive committee, which really, if you think about how some of our members are structured, you have a city council, and then you have a governing body like a utility commission that might operate more like a board of directors for the utility. And that's sort of how WPPI is structured. We have our board, but then we have an 11-member executive committee. The board meets 3 times a year. Our executive committee meets every month, and sometimes more often if necessary, to come together and look at in more detail and give a lot more attention than what the board is able to do on a 2 to 3 times a year. Kevin, I appreciate his service on our executive committee. He also chairs some of our other committees. Mike Noreen is active in our Member Services Advisory Group. We have a number of groups, Member Service Advisory Groups. We have a Finance and Audit Committee. We have a Personnel Committee. We have a Distribution Services Advisory Group. So we have a number of ways that we call on our members and ask our members to provide direction to WPPI. And I really appreciate when we have volunteers like Kevin, like Mike, that are willing to give up their time and help us as we put programs together. You all spend a lot of time on customer communication, community engagement. A lot of those programs that we provide to members come through the Member Service Advisory Group and really dovetail nicely with what Mike Noreen does. and then your energy service manager, Stacy, working with your community to deliver those services. And then I report to the executive committee and the board, and then that WPPI staff, which really is the power behind what we do with our member communities. They're the ones that really are delivering on those services. If you look at what WPPI was created for, again, it mirrors exactly what I talked about: reliable, low-cost electricity, best-in-class services, and effective advocacy. And really, the focus is on helping our member communities be better places to live, work, and play. And we actually talk about this mission statement. I sat in our power supply staff meeting today, and before they got into the meat of their agenda, they first had a pop quiz on what our mission statement was, and they had a couple of the staff members rattle off the mission statement. So it stays in front of our employees, so they understand what's important to our members is important to us, and it really is about serving the communities. And one thing that we do, just like you probably do, is do member satisfaction surveys. As I said earlier, you put a lot of emphasis on member communications. We do the same thing. And we also want to hear back from our customers, that's you, how we're doing. And so we periodically, every 2 years, we do a customer satisfaction survey. And anytime we do that survey, I really look to read the verbatim comments. We'll get pages and pages of comments from our members, our member managers, staff, and members of our communities that will provide really pointed feedback on how we're doing. And we really do respond to that. A few years back, we saw in our member survey, satisfaction survey, that our numbers had slipped in the technology area. Our billing and metering services had slipped. And so we really put an emphasis in this current business plan to beef up our services in North Star support, our metering support, and it really turned the numbers around. So now that we're back up into the 9 out of 10 of our member leaders are satisfied overall with how WPPI is delivering on those services. If you look at WPPI's overall budget, about $435.6 million total. If you broke that out, 94% of that is all power supply related. Whether it's our wholesale power purchases that we enter into, we have a number of long-term contracts and short-term contracts, and then our assets itself, where we own and maintain power supply assets. We have taxes, and then fuel for our generation fleet, and then transmission cost. We actually own transmission through the American Transmission Company, ATC, and also CapEx 2020. And so we have a sizable investment, which helps us hold down our rates as well. But it's still about 15% of our total cost is transmission cost. Not all of that $435 million comes to WPPI through rates. Roughly $352 million comes through rates. The rest of it is off-system sales. So we have asset sales that we make to a couple of joint action agencies from the Point Beach nuclear plant. When we entered into that contract, we were able to more or less right-size our piece of that contract by selling off about 30% to 2 joint action agencies. So we make some margin off of that. Our services income. So we make sure that we recover part of our cost for delivering services through fees that the members pay that use those services. That helps balance out the costs that we recover in rates and that which we recover through services. That's about another $3 million. And then, as I said, we have our transmission investment income. We get about $10 to $11 million in investment income, and the most of that comes from our investment and our return in ATC. Power supply, average wholesale power supply costs have been relatively flat. I like this slide quite a bit because it does show you the stability of WPPI's costs over the long term. Going back 2016, you can actually look back to about 2013 or 14, where we really started seeing our costs stabilize and then actually come down a bit. Our costs have been relatively stable, averaged around $70 a megawatt hour range. And then in 2018, they really flattened out a bit. We finished the year 2020 at about $71.25 per megawatt hour, which was slightly below budget. We had an interesting 2020 with the pandemic hitting. We were really concerned that we were going to see our costs go up simply because our sales were going to go down. We did see a drop off roughly 5% in our customer load, but fortunately that was offset by lower market energy prices, which we were able to take advantage of, and that helped maintain our rates. We actually finished the year slightly below budget for 2020. And for 2021, we projected that we'd have if you compared budget to budget, it's a slight decrease when you look at the 2020 budget compared to what we're looking at for 2021. If you look at how our rates actually ended, because we were below budget in 2020, the budgeted rate for 2021 is a slight increase, about 0.5% over what our actual costs were in 2020. As I said, I sat in on the power supply staff meeting today. We take a look every month at how our industrial load is doing in a number of sectors. Our industrial load is about 10% below compared to what it typically is on a 3-year average. So we recognize that the impact of the pandemic on our sales is real, and whether it has long-term lasting impact, whether that load comes back, yet to be determined. We hope that it does, but we'll have to see how this thing plays out over time. There's been a lot of questions about Texas and could that happen here in the Midwest. There is nothing that's 100% foolproof, but there is definitely differences in the way the Texas system is structured and how our system, WPPI, and the greater MISO, that's the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, the major footprint that really spans from Manitoba Hydro all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, sort of that strip in the Midwest where WPPI operates within. And so when you look at how Texas is a standalone system, they got hit with a whole bunch of things all at once. Unprecedented cold, natural gas supply, so they have a significant drop in temperatures, which then calls on people to use more gas. Since gas for heating, gas has a priority to go to heating first and then to power generation. And so gas prices skyrocketed. Also, their gas system wasn't as winterized as the gas system here is in the Midwest, and especially up in colder parts such as Wisconsin. And so they had a lot of their pumping stations and their compressor stations that froze over, iced over, and so they lost gas supply. They had a wind power. It wasn't, you heard a lot of talk from some parts of the media before there really was a good information about it was the wind resources that dropped off. Frankly, it was all resources struggled. So they had coal plants that had issues. They had coal piles that were frozen over. They had nuclear plant had one unit go down because of the cold. They had a number of gas units that either had operational issues because of the cold, or they were curtailed. In other words, they did not have access to natural gas because of the cold temperatures. So every generating resource in Texas had issues. It wasn't just wind. Wind had some issues with icing. One of the big differences between operating a system in Texas and operating where we do is we winterize our systems. And so our wind turbines up here can withstand temperatures at minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. They're built for that. Now, they do trip off if it does drop below 22, and that has happened in the past. But at the same time, our other resources are maintained to operate in this kind of cold climate. We put our generators in insulated, heated buildings, and so we're able to run no matter, for the most part, regardless. You look back at the polar vortex in 2014, we were seeing wind chill temperatures in this part of the country, minus 25 to minus 40, and we were able to keep the lights on. A couple other things, the regulatory structure there, they are completely deregulated in the state of Texas. Obviously, that adds a whole new wrinkle. And so generators they only make money if they're the low cost provider into their marketplace. And so there's not a lot of emphasis on spending extra dollars to do things such as winterize your system for a cold snap that might happen once in 10 years. We operate in a fully regulated system. And so we have not only incentivized, but required to make sure that our generation shows up regardless of the weather. And so we may not have the lowest cost 24/7, 365, but our lights stay on and we have competitive power supply cost. I can tell you that a lot of people in Texas would have happily paid more over the course of a number of years to avoid the impacts that they just saw for that week and sometimes even longer. Go on to the next slide. So that cold snap did hit this part of the country as well. And so we reported in great detail to the executive committee in February on what that caused as far as the impact on WPPI. I can tell you that prices in this part in the MISO system, we saw prices on some hours of the day hit well over $400 a megawatt hour, averaged over that February 15th to the 19th, greater than $100 per megawatt hour on peak. That's 10 times higher than what we typically see for that period of time. So you would think that we would experience a huge price hike. Understanding the MISO system is important to understand how the WPPI responds in these situations. And so the way MISO works is we buy all of our load requirements out of the MISO system. So MISO operates this big marketplace, and we tell MISO what our load requirements are a day ahead, and then we literally buy that out of the MISO system. So we experience those $100 to $400 per megawatt hour prices over that period of time. On the other side of the coin, WPPI owns resources, has our own generation and long-term contracts that we then sell into that same MISO market. And that's a hedge against our power supply costs that we pay. Our resources performed extremely well. We did not lose very much at all out of our resource mix. Most all of our wind resources operated. The problem with wind sometimes is when it's really cold like that, or when it's really hot, sometimes the wind doesn't blow as much. But to the extent that we did have wind, they were operating. So our coal plants performed extremely well. Even our natural gas peaking plants did really well. So when you balance out the revenue that we received by selling our resources into the MISO market and what we had to pay for that extraordinary high period of time, it almost works out to a wash. And that's really what we're built to do. Our resources act as a hedge. And so we like it. We see, it's a balance between having good, reliable, low cost resources and then being able to balance that off against when we see high power supply costs. So really, at the end of it, when you look at what our average costs are going to be for February, it really is going to be a typical month. We're not going to see a lot of variation from what we anticipated from a budgetary standpoint. I'll stop there since I think that was probably one area where I was going to get some questions and just see if anybody has any questions on what happened in Texas. Yeah, Kevin.
I just want to say, before you even go to questions there, I just want to say that was very understated even. For the folks that live in River Falls, many of us natural gas customers as well, we did feel some pain on our natural gas bills last month. But being a member of WPPI Energy and having the hedging capabilities, having the capability of being able to sell into the market to stabilize those costs. So Mike, in River Falls, for example, our power cost adjustment charge for that really, really bad month was 1/3 of 1 cent. So on 700 kilowatt hours, that's about $1.20. So that was the pain people felt when many folks are paying over $100 a megawatt hour. WPPI really stabilized it for our residential and commercial customers in River Falls, and that's a big deal. And nobody's going to notice it, but I'm telling you, in that month, the stabilization saved people hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, it really did. I tell you what, we have a marketing rate. It's called a new load market pricing rate, which is tied directly to market prices. And typically it's a very competitive rate. We've got about 4 customers across the entire system. These are really large industrial customers that we use that rate to entice them or incentivize them to locate in a member community. They're going to see their power bill double for the month of February because they were completely exposed to the market cost and they don't get the value of our hedges, of our resources. And so they're going to see their power bills double for that month of February. Now, the rest of the time, it's not a bad cost and they see a bit of a discount. Again, as I said, we're built to have a really stable, low-cost, competitive power supply over the long term. We're not built to be the cheapest, but we're built to provide stability, and your customers benefited from that. There's no other question. Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, it's always good to see you. I wish we could be in person, but always enjoyed our conversations when you do visit. You mentioned the natural gas facilities, and I don't remember which one they are now. But so when we saw those peaks, were we able to dial back those natural gas facilities and depend on our coal plants and our wind and some other spots, or how does that work?
Vicki, go ahead and advance to the next slide. This slide is a pretty good picture of where our resources are located. It's exactly where our resources are located. So our we don't, we make all of our resources available to the market, and the way MISO dispatches those resources is based on your cost. So we'll tell MISO that it costs us X dollars to run Boswell, and it costs X dollars to run our natural gas plants. And then they stack up all the resources and they just start using every resource until they clear the market. And once they have enough resources running based on, starting at the lowest cost and working their way down that stack, once they have enough resources to meet every minute of every hour of the day, then everybody gets paid the same cost, the market clearing price at the end of the day. We did our Island Street actually buys gas under retail tariff. And even though it had slightly, so that one was running pretty much 24/7 over a couple of days. South Fond du Lac, that gas plant, we switched over to burn oil. So it can burn natural gas or oil, and we have large tanks on site. And so we switched over because it was curtailed, because gas, again, it went to provide heating. And so we did have to switch it over to oil, but it was still clearing. For the most part, it's still cleared at a price that recovered the cost of us burning oil in that plant. So we don't dial it back necessarily, but if we're concerned that like we're going to have a high gas cost, when we bid a plant in, we might tell them we're going to add 10 cents to the cost of our dispatch in order to make sure that if they do dispatch the cost, we're able to recover it. We do that occasionally on some of the coal plants if we anticipate higher coal cost or something, and we want to make sure that maybe it doesn't run, but if it does, we're going to make money off of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So this is a picture of where our resources are located. The two most recent is the Point Beach Solar, which actually is going to come online this year, and we'll start taking power from that in June of 2022. But it's actually under construction right now, and it'll be online this year under the contract. And then the other was Bishop Hill 3, the wind resource that's down in northern Illinois. I can tell you, 10 years ago, when you do an RFP for power supply resources, renewables were not going to be your low-cost option. That's flipped. And today, when you do an RFP, your low-cost options, at least for us in the last couple of RFPs, have been renewables. And so as we have resource space open up, which will start to happen in the late 20s, when we do RFPs, we'll most likely see us backfilling any changes in our resource needs with renewables. So our resource mix will continue to become more green. By 2025, we'll be 40% lower in greenhouse gas emissions than what we were in 2005, which is we were very much in line with meeting the Clean Power Plan that the Obama administration had put forward under the prior, 2 administrations ago. And so whatever the current Biden administration is looking at, we feel relatively comfortable that it may be a stretch goal, but it's not unachievable. So we'll keep making decisions based on a number of factors, economics right at the top, reliability obviously right at the top, and can we add more renewables and reduce our emissions? And we have told every one of our member communities, and River Falls knows as well as anybody, if any member wants to go further faster with a higher percentage of renewables in their supply for their communities, we're able to do that with either renewable energy certificates or even projects that are dedicated to a member. So any member that wants to go further faster than what WPPI is going to be able to do as our system requirements turn over, we're happy to work with them. The two more slides real quick. The next slide is, as I said, this is definitely indicative of what 2020 was all about. So we did a legislative conference with APPA last week. It was all virtual. We had conversations over Zoom with our congressional delegation. We met with Glenn Grothman, and then he was really, he afterwards tweeted out that he was happy to meet with us. And, even though Glenn is a pretty staunch conservative, he has a real soft spot for municipal utilities. His high school history teacher was Jim Coots, who was on the Cedarburg City Council and Utility Commission for years and years and years. And so that local connection means so much when you talk to our congressional delegation and our representatives in Madison. And so we really rely on that local connection that you all have. I don't have it, but you guys have it. And we lean on that and really build on that connection. And Glenn Grothman has that soft spot simply because of a relationship going all the way back to high school. And so this was our legislative conference this last week. And, fortunately, I think we're seeing hopefully the end of the pandemic. Hopefully by fall, we'll be able to actually sit down with our congressional delegation face to face again. The last slide that I'll hit is on our really what was a big initiative with our member communities in putting together a technology suite that was on par with what any larger, perhaps investor-owned utility would be providing to their member communities. It all really starts with the AMI technology out in the field, which you guys are well on your way to putting in the AMI meters. I understand you've got about 2,700 out there, and you're continuing to put those in. And using that AMI data and our meter data management system, you're able to then deliver through the North Star billing system and the My Account online portal, really top-notch information to customers. Really when I talk about economies of scale, this is one area where it really pays off. That meter data management system was a software package that when WPPI put it in, it was about $2 million for the software initially. And then we have multiple thousands of dollars a year for maintenance costs. And then we have staff that's dedicated to making that system run and making sure the data that is pulled from those meters is scrubbed and accurate so that when it goes into the billing software, you get accurate bills on the other side, and the data that your customers see on the My Account platform is accurate as well. So really, it is a team effort on your end and in conjunction with WPPI and delivering a top-notch system that really was envisioned back in 2010 and 11 when the advanced metering infrastructure was starting to be talked about. And WPPI, again, put together a task force of members that were interested in this technology, and then they drove the bus and set the course, and then WPPI was obligated to implement that policy through the programs that we've built. And Kevin's been right there at the executive committee leading the way on input, and Mike Noreen on the MSAG had a lot of input in some of these programs as well. So with that, I really appreciate the time that you gave me. Hopefully next time I see you, it's in person. Would love to do that, but be happy to answer any other questions.
Just one more quick question, Mike.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Scott.
Have you done any more solar gardens like we have in River Falls, and I know New Richmond had one too, any more planned,
Yep.
or what you talked about renewables? What other renewables are you doing those types of
Yeah.
projects around the footprint?
So we had one other solar garden between, other than the one in River Falls and New Richmond. We were able to work with one of the member communities in the UP. Lance put in a small solar garden. They actually got some funding from the state of Michigan and helped defray some of the costs there. We haven't had a lot of success otherwise. It's been those three. And I think a lot has to do with the way the commission changed the nature of the program. As you recall, when we put that program together, we were able to provide a fixed price return to customers so that they could have a pretty much a guaranteed return within a 12 to 15 year window. The commission modified that program, and now we don't have a guaranteed, time frame in which customers can get payback. So that really made it more difficult to market those programs going forward. You guys did exceptionally well, but that was because of the efforts that is very unique to what you were doing in River Falls with your industrial park and some of the other programs you have. I've told other members that want to do a solar garden. The only thing that we ask is that they pre-sell it, and we'll be happy to do one. But none of the other members have stepped up and went down that path. But it's available. It's still a program that we have. If they pre-sell it, then we're happy to move forward with it. Other renewables, I don't have a slide in the deck, but it shows where we have open requirement needs in the future. We don't overbuild our system. We don't buy more resources than what we need. That's not what we do. We match up our resource mix with the load that we anticipate from our customers. We don't have any one resource that represents more than 10% of our capacity requirements. And so, but we also have multiple number of short-term, medium, and longer-term agreements out there with power supply resources. As we have space open up, then we look at what's a good way to fill that space. We really don't have any resource needs until 2027, 28. And most likely those will be renewables. We have 3 or 4 vintage renewable contracts, wind contracts that'll be up in that 27, 28, 29 timeframe. And frankly, the costs that we can replace those with are probably about a third of what those contract costs are. Those contracts will be 20 years at that point in time. And renewables, especially wind, has dropped that much, so that the new contracts that we put in place will be about a third of the cost of those contracts when they roll off in 27, 28, 29.
Do you envision any wind gardens similar to what we had for solar gardens in any communities, or is that just not enough scale?
It's probably an issue of scale. The benefit of the solar gardens was it's local. I mean, you guys can drive past it and see it. And so that was sort of an appeal, so that we can, you could put it in your communities behind the meter. And, it's a lot, really almost impossible to do that with wind and put it behind the distribution wholesale meters. And so it's probably less likely we would do any kind of a wind garden. But definitely, if the opportunity presents itself to do more solar gardens, we'll do them.
Thank you.
Patrick, you had a question?
I just wanted to let the board know that I can't see all of them. So if there are other questions, they should maybe chime in, and I'll pause for just a second. Okay. Given that, I want to thank you again. The first time you came, Mike, I learned a great deal, and I really appreciate it. I want to echo both you and Scott saying, hope we can do this in person. That would be great. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time, I believe you shared not just your email address, but also your phone number. Is that
Sure.
Okay? It's not on there, and I don't need it, but I really appreciated that you were willing to let us have that easy contact information. I'm sure if anybody has the need for that, they could get it through Kevin.
I love answering phone calls too. So
yeah.
I shoot me an email, even text. I know I text with Kevin quite a bit as well. I also want to introduce Lori, that's on the camera there as well. She's our manager of member relations, and really I rely on her more than you could ever imagine in staying connected. It's really tough staying connected to 51 different communities. And she spends a ton of time and really is our front line. We get a lot of issues that we don't know about, but Lori finds out about them when she talks to our member communities, and she makes sure that we, the people inside our office, understand the issues that you're dealing with so that we can respond to those. So, and then of course, Vicki was running my slides, and she's actually keeps me on track, as she would expect a good executive assistant to do. So I appreciate her helping out tonight.
Very good. Well, I also wanted to tell you I appreciate that you were ahead of us on the Texas questions. I was going to ask about that, but you answered everything I had, so there was no need to chime in.
Give credit to Kevin because he alerted me to there might be a question or two that'll come up. And then I'd also be remiss in not introducing Stacy, but you guys see Stacy almost as your staff person, so but she's on the call as well. So appreciate what our energy service managers do out in the communities.
Very
So
good.
I really do appreciate the time, and I'll let you continue on with your meetings.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike.
You bet. Take care, everybody. Kevin, thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Yes. All right, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time tonight, and Vicki and Lori and Stacy running. Stacy, just one more shout out for Stacy, what she does in our community with new construction design assistance for any new commercial customers coming into town. It's a big deal. She does a great job with that. Monthly, anybody who's moving to rate classes, she gets those hard calls, or she has to go out and talk to commercial customers who are moving rate classes. She does a great job with that. And then through the whole COVID year, she gave me weekly stats on what's going on with our top 20 customers, and that was also really good. So Stacy's an asset to our organization. So thank you, Stacy. Mike.
Thank you, Kevin.
Lori,
I appreciate being part of the team.
All right.
Thanks, guys. You guys have a good evening.
And I was thinking, Scott Morissette, you're about the highest spot in River Falls. I guess you'd be the best spot for a wind turbine up there.
There's a certain IT director in the city who has a better yard elevation than I do. We could put it in his yard.
All right.
Oh, we'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
See ya.
Kevin, we're moving to point 7.
Yeah. So what we want to do next, I think, too. So we have our senior accountant, Tracy Biederman, is here to give us a 2020 financial update for electric, water, and wastewater. I also know Sarah Carlson, our finance director, is also online. If the questions go deeper than Tracy, but I'm sure she can handle 99.99% of them. So let's put together a PowerPoint presentation, and we're lucky to have senior accountant Tracy Biederman here to give us a 2020 rundown, financial rundown. Thanks, Tracy.
Not a problem. Just let me figure out which screen to share here and how I work it. So I put a little bit more effort into this documentation just because it was preparing the 2020 pre-audit financial data. And if I share contents, so I'll be looking at my big screen instead of my little one. Okay, I believe you now have the PDF or the slideshow on your screens as well, right?
We can see it, Tracy, and we can hear you well. So thank you.
All right, perfect. So yes, I'm Tracy Biederman. I've been with Utilities since 2011 and moved, started as the accountant, moved up to the senior accountant. We now have a few people on staff that have the same capability and knowledge. So I have a little bit of sharing time that I share with the city's general financial accounting. So just to start off, this is unaudited 2020 financial statements and a few statistics. So you all should have the booklet with the revenue and the balance sheet items that was sent out Friday evening by Lene. So this is just some graphical data that I put together to show what the revenue comparison is for the 3 years. So in 2020, with everything that was unknown, the city took the steps to contain quite a bit of our spending versus in hiring freezes, training and travel. Powerful Choices had to take a little bit of a cut last year, and just cutbacks where it wasn't necessary. So this is kind of a self-explanatory slide. I don't know if my cursor kind of shows the decline in revenues. Water's pretty stable, sewer was pretty stable. Expenditures, you know, we could cut back where we could, but obviously we don't want to cut back too much. So you can see it's pretty stagnant, except for the revenue in electric. So they all had a positive net income at the end of 12/31, except for the electric fund. And that segues into the electric fund had their tariff that came into effect last year, but I'll touch base on that in a little bit. So at the end of 2020, our accounts receivable spiked. The PSC put that order in where we could not disconnect for non-payment. So I believe people probably took advantage of that. At the end of 2020, we did submit $59,000 to the tax roll that the PSC allows us to do through the utility accounts for tenants or for landlords and owners, as compared to the prior year, which was only $5,000. So if you look at our cash and investments, we still have a very strong position as of 12/31, even though electric and sewer took a little bit of a bigger hit than water and stormwater. So here's a little bit of a plant addition summary for 2020. Some big projects that took place, projects that the council accepted the infrastructure for. So this is part of the continued investments in our critical infrastructure and is part of the reason why our depreciation was significantly under budget, but overspended on the actual level. So Kevin, I'd like for you to segue into a little bit of the need and probably this critical infrastructure is our benefit and not to have what happened in Texas.
Yeah, I
If you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I do. I will just add to that. I mean, we've been talking about that. I don't know. I've been here 8 years, probably 6.5 out of the 8 years. And, you know, when we talk to the policymakers like yourself or city council, you know, we can acknowledge that sewer systems and water systems and electric substations, no, they aren't that appealing, you know, as far as getting votes and getting out there in the public's eye. But that stability of that utility infrastructure makes for a solid community, a community where people want to be, a community where commercial customers want to be, and where we can keep rates stable and the lights on and outages short. So again, I hats off to the policymakers for adopting our strategy of continuing to invest in some of the, you know, and maybe it's not the right word, but the unsexier areas, and it's the stuff underground and out of sight. But it's the stuff to keep your lights on and the water running and the toilets flushing. So thanks for allowing us to keep investing in what is making us a solid community.
Yep.
Well, Kevin, it isn't necessarily sexy, as you said, but it becomes real sexy as long as the light switch goes on. When it doesn't come on, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, you know, it's like we, you know, with Mike Peters was talking too, you know, about the stable February we had for electric rates. It kind of goes unnoticed, but there's a lot of planning and overhead and infrastructure and resources that go into making that happen. So when folks like yourselves can at least notice that's a positive, and that money is well invested for the stability of our community.
So since most of the funds were pretty strong at the end of 2020, I'm just going to focus a little bit more on the electric fund, just to give a little bit more advancement into the understanding of where electric got hit the hardest last year. So I've done a little scale of 88% of our customers are residential. And with that said, we had total KWHs of 122.3 million in 2020 in relation to, you see the other 2 years prior, where it was significantly more. So then I pulled out the public authority because many institutions shut down to the public last year. And that was part of our biggest hit. So the 25.6 million stagnant 2018 and 2019 dropped to 22.1 million of KWH that we sold to public authority. Our biggest hit was the UW-RF system.
Yeah, we were talking about that throughout the year last year. As I mentioned, Stacy was giving me weekly reports, and there were some months that were incredibly low when the university was basically shut down, especially through last summer. So yeah, that impacted our utility, as you can see.
Yep, and that's the large power and the demand and all the additional revenue that's generated from those services. So you can see residential definitely took a bigger hike for sales in 2020. Everybody was at home, stay-at-home order, right? So the different customer classes is where you can see the different areas that were hit or improved year over year for the type of customer as a result of the shutdowns.
I mean, you're not going to get into it tonight, nor should we, but
No,
some of those demand costs and things that go with these large commercial and public authority customers, that also is a lot of lost revenue through the demand charges that are typically higher. So lower demand charges, not KWH charges, but some of those demand charges that we lost.
yes, yep. So like I said earlier, we had the new rates implemented in 9/29. We, as a community, as a utility, delayed that implementation, and I'll have Kevin touch on that too, where the final impact that we had WPPI do an analysis of was those couple months we could have generated $157,000 of additional revenues, but we chose to delay the implementation for customer relation reasons. So if Kevin, if you want to touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, I'll just mention that real quick. I mean, that was a conscious decision, right? I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We didn't know exactly last July how significantly it was going to impact people. And we just felt it would be maybe irresponsible is too strong, but I think so. I mean, we didn't want to install a 9.5% residential rate increase in the hottest months of the year, and knowing the uncertainty what the pandemic was doing to people and their incomes and whatnot. So we made a conscious decision to say now is not the time. And we knew we were going to forego some money. We didn't know it would be 157,000. Maybe thought it was 100,000 or something. Hindsight's 2020 there. So we did postpone it until we got to the shoulder month of October. And I think it was the right thing to do, though it did cost the utility and it doesn't look great in the bottom line, but I think it was the right thing to do in 2020.
Yep, absolutely. So my final slide here is just going to show the comparison of the electric utility for the 3 prior years. So starting in 2018. So that first line, the hydraulic power generation, we just started our FERC studies in 2018. 2019, we had a few more studies, and then 2020, we kind of got hit with some additional expenses that we didn't probably originally factor in the budget for 2020 because we only had $75,000 for FERC expenditures in 2020. And then we took a hit for 325,000 of those. But otherwise, the other costs in the hydraulic power generation are their standard operating and maintenance cost. And the other thing I noted earlier was our increase in infrastructure has resulted in a higher than budgeted depreciation rate for the last 3 years. So I put a little factor together that in 2018, our net plant additions were 4.4 million, and that was because we also had the Winter Street substation go online that year, or finalized and capitalized on a financial standard. And then in 2018, it was 1.58 million. And then in 2020, we had 1.1 million of infrastructure added to our bottom line.
Maybe I'm jumping the gun here with you, Tracy, but 2021 is looking much better for electric.
Correct. We will have a full year of the rate increase on our plate. Yep. We budgeted a little bit, I think a little bit better on the FERC. We added 100,000 from the previous year. So now we have a total of 175,000. I don't know how fast FERC and the studies plan on moving ahead this year, but you could probably ad lib to that as well.
We're going to hit that, and then I think a couple presentations away.
Yep. So, I mean, that's just an overview of how 2020 ended in a nutshell. There, as the audit folks go through all their work papers, there could be still some minor adjustments. They didn't anticipate any large or shocking adjustments, just some small small budgetary and expenditure. But the numbers will and probably will change, can and probably will change. But immaterially.
You see the debt service number seems to be trending down pretty aggressively. Refresh my memory again. Wasn't there a $4 million bond on the new substation?
Okay, so for governmental funds versus enterprise funds, that bond sits on the balance sheet as a liability. And we only record the interest expense on the profit and loss table here. So the debt service is just the interest expense that we incurred. So 2018, we paid additional fees to open up the bond, establish the bond. So the fees were higher then. In 2019, so as your amortization schedule goes out further, you anticipate your interest expense to go down.
Sure. So even with the loss, though, and I'm assuming there's a debt service covenant in our bond requirement.
Yep.
Even with the loss, we were okay there. We cleared the covenant.
Absolutely. Yep. We have a restricted cash account for that covenant specifically for that.
Okay. So is it a make whole covenant then? If we don't make it, then we go into the cash reserve and take out there what we need, or how does that work? I'm getting way too down in the weeds, and nobody else really cares about this, but
nope, that's just fine. No, so as a utility, our cash collections, we reserve over the course of 12 months what our debt service is. And that's our priority, obviously. So if there's obviously no cash, then we do dip into our unrestricted reserves to support the financial impact that could possibly have.
okay.
But the cash and all the utilities are definitely strong at the end of the year.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
We're just more than 90-day cash reserve for electric. 90 days is our goal.
So if there are any other questions, I'll have Kevin and Lene make this slide available to the members. There's a few appendixes in there that may just help explain additional statistics for you guys. I like it. Pin drops, no questions.
All right. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah.
All right, folks.
I think we get back on schedule, Patrick, and maybe I think we're on 3. Tracy, thank you very much for doing that tonight.
We jumped right past 2, so we're gonna go way back to 2.
All right.
So
sorry.
we'll get through. It's okay. We'll get through it quick. All right. We're looking at the consent agenda, and as we've not met for a while, I'm looking for an approval of the following minutes. We've got West Central Biosolids from 10/15/2020, 11/17/2020, their annual members meeting, 12/17/2020, 1/7/2021, and 1/21/2021. So we've got 5 different meetings there that we're looking for approval. Before I go to that, though, is there anything that stands out to anybody that we need to discuss, pull out? Excellent. Having seen that, can I get a motion to approve those listed minutes?
I make a motion we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Scott. Second.
Second.
Tim, thank you. All right, all in favor of approving the consent agenda minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Very good. Let's move on to the new business. We're on item 3, resolution to endorse new economic development electric rate for qualifying commercial customers.
Mike Noreen is here to give a short presentation, our energy efficiency coordinator and also city forester. But Mike is here to let you know about an effort we're putting together with 14 other WPPI communities to give ourselves another tool in the toolbox to help some of our new commercial customers coming into River Falls. So, Mike, you want to talk about our potentially new rate and see if our utility advisory board is okay with moving forward with that?
Certainly. Thanks for having me. Mike Noreen, Conservation and Efficiency Coordinator. Happy to be speaking with you guys tonight. I have a presentation that'll take probably 5 minutes, and we'll go over the new economic development rate, which Kevin and Mike Peters had brought up earlier, called the new load market pricing. So I'm going to share my screen. And, all right. So all look
We
good.
can see it, Mike. We can see it. We can hear you good.
Great. So new load market pricing. And okay, next slide. Of course. I do want to add that Tim Ament, the director of rates, is also on the call. So if there's some questions that come up that I can't answer, he'll be available. So the new load market pricing, economic development rates, it's for existing industrial customers to expand or to incent new industrial customers to locate to River Falls. It's a 4-year contract that they're going to be paying a market price for electricity. Why we do this, besides the reasons that stated earlier, is also a competitive thing. This is a rate that is common with investor owns that surround us, as well as co-ops offer them. And a lot of other public power utilities offer this particular rate. So we're certainly not on the bleeding edge on this one. The concept is that this industrial customer would be purchasing wholesale power cost, and it would be a pass-through from the utilities. From a distribution standpoint, there are ways to recover some of our costs. The customer has a choice when it comes to distribution, and that is they can get the construction credit and pay the distribution charge, or they can pay for the new facilities and not pay that distribution charge. That's up to them. But either way, we are recouping some of those costs. As I mentioned, it is a 4-year contract, and it does not impact the cost of any other customers on our system. The one risk factor is to the customer is because they are paying that market rate. There's fluctuations. It could go up or down, and that's what they are going to pay. So we're talking about the incremental load of the new market pricing. What we do is we establish that baseline, and that's going to stay there for the whole 4 years. So for an existing customer, we figure out what they are already using for those as a baseline for the last 12 months. And then whatever that goes above that, if it meets that 400 kW threshold, then that's the price that they're getting for the new load market price. And for new customers, the baseline is 70% of the expected load. So not all of their energy is going to be that at that cost for the new load market pricing. And I can go into the details if you want to know more information on the whys. This graph will kind of put in picture for you. On the Y, you can see the load in kilowatt hours. And on the X, you'll see any given day, 24 hours. So we look at their baseline as they're on the black dotted line. As the morning goes, everything's kind of quiet. The day starts, they start making their widgets, and their baseline goes up, and the day shuts off, and then it goes down. All of this below that black dotted line, that is their standard large power rate that they would pay. The new load market price is anything that is above that at any given time. So this all in this area is the new load market price. The requirements and limits, we're looking at the incremental load of 400 kW. That's pretty big. We only have a few customers on our system that could meet that threshold right now. So it's not for everybody. But so that's what we're looking at. And then the 15-minute interval metering that we are able to now fulfill with our AMI. So we would qualify under that requirement. And then the approved application, it starts with the Utility Advisory Board, then it would go to City Council next week. And then WPPI would be submitting it to the Wisconsin Public Service Commission afterwards. What you cannot do with the new load market pricing, you cannot transfer businesses within, you can't lure these businesses in from another WPPI community, whether it's in Wisconsin, Iowa, or Michigan. And then you can't transfer from other Wisconsin utilities either. So you're having to pull someone from out of state. And remember, this is ruled on or governed by the Wisconsin Public Service Commission. So they're looking out for what's best for Wisconsin as a whole. The timeline for the new load market pricing is kind of laid out here. It started in 2016. It was first offered, and I'll back up just a minute. These kind of programs do come through those advisory committees, like the Member Services Advisory Committee, and certainly goes into the Executive Committee and onward with WPPI. So this is certainly not the first time Kevin has seen this, nor I. So going back to this, in 2016, this program was developed. The difference was it had a 500 kW incremental load requirement, which is pretty high. That kind of limited the customer base for that one. There was also some language in the original tariff that was very restrictive. Yet 29 members did sign on to get this tariff and got approval from the Public Service Commission. In 2020, that changed. One of the member utilities submitted to the PSC a change in that tariff and primarily to reduce it from 500 to 400. And that was readily approved. And now after that last approval, the PSC that said it no longer needs to go for a full hearing. It goes to their staff and then they are able to approve it, which means it's a much faster turnaround and there's a lot less, I guess, scrutiny because they're generally approving of the program. So what WPPI will do is once it is approved by the UAB and City Council, they will take that approved resolution, take it to the PSC in April, along with 15 other WPPI community members who are also going through the same process we are right now. And they will submit it to the PSC. And as I mentioned earlier, because it's just going for staff approval, not the full rate, we can expect a much quicker turnaround. And if all goes according to plan, we would have the new load market pricing rate available in River Falls by the fall of 2021. I like to think it might be a little earlier, but sometimes the PSC takes. So with that, attached is the new load market pricing tariff result, or the updated tariff. So if it's got a lot of details in it, so you have questions, I'm all ears. And Tim Ament, as I mentioned, is on the call. So with that, that is my presentation. And so what I am seeking is the approval of the resolution authorizing RFMU to seek approval from the Wisconsin Public Service Commission for the approval of the new load market pricing.
Hey, Mike, this is Kellen.
Yes.
Hey, so in looking at this, how many, I guess, in River Falls do you anticipate taking advantage of this, or, over the next few years, maybe somebody else can talk to that too, and because it's supposed to entice those businesses to come in, I guess, like what other communities have been able to entice some businesses to move in, and what would be comparable to River Falls that we might be able to see as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I will say that there's interest in this from the economic development side of the city of River Falls. They certainly want to see this as an opportunity as a tool in the toolbox to not always just to entice new businesses to come in, but sometimes some of our large businesses have a choice of whether to expand here or expand somewhere else. And I think that might be just as big of a driver as bringing in new companies. Does that answer your question sufficiently? All right.
So Mike, I want to go back to, oh, I'm sorry, Tim, go ahead. I've been talking all night. You go first.
Okay, thank you. So does this impacts the energy costs? I'm assuming. Does it impact the demand costs?
That I'm not sure the best way to answer that one, and I think I better bring in Tim Ament, the director of rates, who eats and sleeps this sort of thing. So if I would, John, can you get Tim Ament on the call? And he's on right now. He's in the background.
It's a cell phone. He's on a cell phone, 907-301.
Yep, that's me.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me? I apologize. I lost my internet connection during Tracy's presentation, so I had to dial in quick back into the meeting. So
I can hear you.
Yep, you're fine.
Good. To answer your question, there is a demand component to the new load market pricing rate. One is the capacity charge, which currently is quite a bit less than what the demand charge is in the standard CP2, CP3, CP4 rate. And it's a market-based capacity cost based on, and it's set annually based on what the capacity clearing price is in the MISO market. So I think right now it's probably about around $2 a kW, if I'm remembering correctly. But there's also a transmission component to the NLMP rate as well, because even though we're buying the capacity and the energy at market prices, we still have to deliver the energy to River Falls through the transmission system. So there is a transmission component in there as well, which is, if I remember correctly, it's probably about $5 or $6 a kW. So even when you add the transmission and the capacity together, it's still less than what the demand charge is on a standard industrial rate.
Okay, well, I guess that's where I could see where that could affect the existing ratepayers if the demand all of a sudden went up quite a bit, and everybody else would then have to pay for that too, but might be fairly insignificant. Other question: how do you define industrial customers?
In this case, we would define them as if they reach that CP1 or CP2 rate, and certainly if they had a 400 kW system or demand, they would fall into the industrial size. So,
okay, so it's basically just the amount of usage. But so just for instance, would the university qualify for that if you know, they're going to build quite a substantial new building? Would they be eligible for this rate decrease?
They would. If they met that demand component, they would.
Okay. And I guess my last question is, can this be used in conjunction with other incremental tax financing incentives? You know, can companies double up on that?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. Perhaps Tim does.
Well, this rate is just for the electric service to the expansion. Now, whatever other types of economic development programs the city has in place, would also the customer would also be eligible for those. So they're kind of separate from any type of taxing or zoning incentive the city may have, and then related to the electric usage is they're two separate entities. They're two separate programs.
So just to follow up on that, if there's a new business that's coming to town and has no baseline, has no history, has nothing, in the TIF financing world, we set a base amount and say this is the guaranteed tax value that they're going to pay the tax on, regardless of what it evaluates for by the tax assessor. Is there something similar to that, Mike, in how we would set that price for them, or they would have to commit to the 400 kW, or how would that work if they're new out of the ground?
Yeah, we get a pretty good idea of what they expect to use, but there is a ramp up period too. And then after 1 year, we set that baseline at whatever their baseline is. So there is some flexibility, and there is some ramp up time, but after that 1 year, that's when we set the baseline.
And God forbid they came in short, then we would just subtract them from the program?
If they don't meet that 400 kW system, then they go on to that existing utility rate, which would, in this case, would probably be a large power rate.
Okay. And I got another question. So you mentioned that we can't go pirating our clients or our potential customers from other Wisconsin places, but I mean, if somebody moves here, you know, inside Wisconsin, they decide to relocate here, we're just going to put them into the general rate. But is there a period of time after which we can move them into here? Is there, after say 4 years, could we move them in here? I see the 4 year mark on some of this stuff, so that's why I'm asking the 4 years.
Yeah, it's for either moving in or expanding. So if they arrived here and they expanded in 4 years, then that would be different. But I think it would have to meet those two criteria of either coming here and start big, or be here and get bigger.
Okay. Thank you.
Mark? Go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. That was a good presentation. Just curious, so Mr. Peters mentioned there's 51 customers. Is this something that each of the customers looks at? And that's the best that they can offer? Am I saying that right?
There's 51 member utilities out there, and each member utility has to have this particular rate approved by the Public Service Commission, or not. Some people just, they don't meet the criteria. We didn't have AMI for a long time, so we weren't able to offer this. But now it's And now with the changes in that criteria from 500 to 400 and AMI, it seems like it's a very good time for us to offer this rate.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I want to make sure I understand this. I think I know the answer, but I want to be clear. Tim used the example of the university. If the university expanded and did something large, would the expansion receive that rate, or would the entire university system get that 4-year deal?
The expansion would.
Just okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
And then have we, knowing that AMI made it not possible, but can we look back and say we missed any opportunities that could have come, and then along with that, are there any prospects ahead of us? I'm not really looking for business names so much as kind of what's the state of things as you understand it.
Yeah, to look back, there may have been. I can't say for sure. Some of our bigger customers that meet that 400 kW threshold, they've been here for a while. So I don't think we missed a lot with, say, Winfield or Turnkey. But moving forward, there is a lot of opportunities, whether it's existing in Whitetail or in Sterling Ponds and certainly Man Valley. In my work with the community development department, they are very much in favor of this and see lots of opportunities because they do have a lot of people kind of checking us out. And certainly when it comes to Man Valley and the size availability of the lots, that could there's a lot of potential.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question or a comment maybe, Patrick?
Yep, please.
So Mike, maybe you want to just kind of maybe name 3 or 4 different companies or locations to give our group tonight an idea of what 400 kW looks like. That's one. And then Tim Ament, maybe you can give a success story out there from one of our members.
Yep. Some customers that meet the 400 kW are Minnesota Rubber does, Best Made Cookies does. But to that point, did we miss anything? The expansion that Best Made Cookies made would not have qualified. It did not meet the 400 kW threshold. Those two, and those are, I think that is it. I might be missing somebody, but those are our biggest customers right now. And the university is kind of split up into a couple of different sub-meters. So we're not, because of that, we're not seeing that demand size. And Tim, you want to take it away?
Do we have an example, Tim, that might just raise some people's eyebrows or go, oh yeah, that was good?
Sure. Well, the very first customer that went on the NLMP tariff, a large customer from New London, they were about a 500 kW customer, so a fairly large customer, and they about doubled their load to about 1100 kW as a result of an expansion. And they've been on they're about to roll off of the program this year. So in 2021 will be their 4th year on the program. And during that time period for their expansion load, they've saved about 35% on their electric bill, which equates to about $105,000 in savings that they've gotten from this over that 4-year period. So that's fairly significant. And, one thing to keep in mind is that that savings to the customer doesn't come out of the utility. It's a pass-through directly from WPPI through the utility to the customer. So the other customers within the community are not impacted by the NLMP savings of any particular customer.
All right. Any other questions on the new load market pricing?
Yeah, I've got one more. Are there any protections for us if 4 years passes and they decide to drop their load, sell their business? I mean, any of a number of things. If they do 4 years of business and close up shop, I mean, we're not necessarily hurt by it, I guess, but is there any language dealing with what happens after 4 years?
I guess I'll defer to Tim on that one as well.
Well, there isn't any language in the tariff that relates to what happens after 4 years. You know, if they're still have their incremental load of 400 kW, you know, they're probably doing okay. And if they've made the investment in machinery and staff and labor to go ahead with this, you know, they're most likely going to be a going concern after that. So at that point, they would just transfer on to the standard rate and, you know, pay whatever any other customer that similar size would pay. But, you know, I think you're correct in your assessment that, you know, there is no, even if the customer were to go away in 4 years after this contract is expired, there's no harm to the utility. Because the customer is paying at least marginal cost to serve them and probably some more, you know, to help the utility as far as local system costs are concerned. So, you know, there's not a downside necessarily. I mean, there's not a loss to the utility if the customer were to go away at the end of the contract.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anything else?
Yeah, lastly, I'll just pile on one more thing. So Tim Ament, he came with Scott Simpson and I over to Green Bay about 3 years ago, maybe now, and we were talking to a metal fabricating company there who ended up not coming here, but we were introducing the NLMP to them, even though we didn't have the tariff yet, but we wouldn't have gotten that. So WPPI and those folks are active in helping us, you know, offer the best rates we can to our existing customers and potential customers as well. So try to throw that in there.
Scott, you look thoughtful. Are you ready to vote? So, okay. I would entertain a motion at this time.
I so move to approve the resolution authorizing River Falls Municipal Utilities to seek approval from the Wisconsin Public Service Commission for the approval of an economic development rate or a new load market pricing.
Thank you. Can we get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. All right, folks. I don't have all that language as Mark stated, but I mean, I do, but I'm going to keep it simple and say all in favor of approving the resolution. Say aye. You know what? Hold on just a second. I know some of you are getting in the habit of the hands to say things or sound is good and things like that. I'm going to just try a vote by hand here just to see how it goes. If this fails, we'll go right back to saying aye. But the audio doesn't come through perfectly, so I'm going to say all in favor of adopting the resolution. Please note your favor with a show of your hand. Thank you. That is unanimous. So no need for the opposition. Moving on to point 4 in the new business. We're looking at the resolution adopting action items, timing, and financial scope for phase 1 of Powell Falls. dam decommissioning and FERC license amendment.
Is everybody comfortable? I mean, need a break or anything like that? Or are we good? Callan's laughing because he heard this last Friday when we had the
Oh, yeah.
All right, if not, John, allow me to share my screen and I'll get right into a presentation, and then we'll have a resolution adopting our direction on this if we so choose to move ahead with that.
You are able to do so. Are there other people, attendees that you would like to bring into this?
Leslie Brodkowski, I believe, is on the phone as well from TRC.
Yes.
And I would allow her to be able to chime in if she needs to do that.
Okay, I'll bring her in.
Okay. Are you able to see it yet? I think it's trying to share.
We had it for a second. Now it's pretty small and down to the side.
Okay, so I'm going to pull it up on my screen here. Can you see it now or not?
Give it a second. There you go.
All right, so I'm going to go from the beginning, PowerPoint.
Right.
And now I'm going to go to my display settings.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to swap that out.
Yep.
How's that right there?
Perfect.
All right. So we're going to kind of pick up where we left off about a month ago when we had a work session with yourselves and City Council. But before we get into where we were at in that meeting, there might be some inquisition to where we've been at with our hydroelectric licensing, what we've spent and what we've done. So I'm going to touch on that with about a half a dozen slides and try to hit some high level round numbers, not exact numbers, to give you context to where we've been, and then we'll transition to where we're going. So I'm going to just move forward, and I'll start at the very beginning with one slide, and trust me, the slides pick up after this one. But RFMU declared its intent to apply for relicensing of the Junction Falls development and proposed a decommissioning of the Powell Falls development with dam removal in the notice of intent and pre-application document submitted to FERC in August 30th of 2018. To some of you, that seems like yesterday, and to some of you, that seems like 10 years ago. But that was the beginning of this. And before that, we had got our license extended to go to 2023. So we won't even go back that far, but this whole process started on August 30th of 2018. In 2019, we estimated that after study requests were proposed, so the study requests came in at the end of year two, or the middle of year two, that the remainder of this 5-year relicensing process would cost River Falls Municipal Utilities about $662,500 for the issued license from FERC. So I remember giving this presentation back then, and I remember it for a couple reasons. One, I think before I put that $662,000 slide up there, I told everybody just to buckle their seatbelts because a big number's coming. So I remember it for that reason. Then I also remember it because I had too many dumb pictures, word art in my presentation. That's how I remember it. So anyway, no word art today. Clip art, I guess they call that. Anyway, so the FERC mandated studies, we said about 420,000, and we had some consulting work. We estimated to be about 242,000. The consulting work, that was going to be TRC, AIRS, and maybe other consultants, but that was the package. That 420 ended up being a little bit low, actually. I'm going to stick with that number for right now because that was our initial estimate. FERC did ANA on a couple studies. That number bumped up to about 490-ish thousand. So, but in the beginning, we said it's going to cost us 662,000. Prior to that, TRC did work for us in year one and year 1.5 to get this thing submitted, and we spent $145,000 or so with them, $154,000 with them back then, for a total of $817,000. That is what we were all going to be in this for, about $817,000. But with that said, we did know that we were going to hopefully work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I remember when I gave that presentation a few years ago, we were in discussions with the Army Corps, and our fingers were crossed. My fingers were crossed that was going to come together. we were feeling really confident because of where we were at with the discussions with them, but we weren't sure how involved they were going to be. So when we did our initial estimate with them, we were guessing they could be involved from anywhere from $115,000 up to $200,000. So what we did is we went on the low end there and said, okay, maybe they're going to be in for $115,000 if they can help out, which will leave us with an estimate of about $547,000 to get through the study session. In the end, if you ask the Army Corps, they contributed about $210,000, and that was what they contributed. But I have to say, we're going to see roughly about $172,000. It may be 170, it may be 173. The final numbers haven't come in yet, but about 172,000 they were able to put towards our studies, and then the remainder of that was to pay for their administration of the project. So we were able to take $172,000 off of that big initial number. So I want you to look at line item 3 here, the mandatory FERC studies and relicensing. That's the 493. Some things were added in there. Some additional studies were added in there. We had to buy some sondes for water quality, for the water quality study. One got stolen. We lost a couple in the flood. We had to replace them. So there's some additional costs in there, but our studying and relicensing was up to 493. And as you can see, if you add in those first 2 years again, we're at $648,000. So again, our initial estimate was we thought we were going to pay anywhere between 462 and 547 for the study seasons moving forward. Well, we're going to be projected to spend about 493. Let me go back a slide right there, 493. But we probably have another 60,000 to go potentially, which is going to put us at about $543,000 for the studies and the administration of all of those and the consulting work. It's almost eerie that our original budget was 547. So we're pretty close. And I look back on how we came up with that. I know TRC has formulas and whatnot, but we hit that pretty close. Again, it's a big number, but the takeaway there is we are within budget. We also said in our original budgeting presentations about what this is going to cost the utility. One of the theories was the production of the hydroelectric facilities. We're going to be able to pay for a lot of this work. And I'll pay for it might be a little too strong of a word, but it's definitely avoided costs. This is money that the utility did not have to spend to go buy electricity. And so there's the first 3 years when both Junction Falls and Powell Falls were running. You can see we're averaging, around 128,000 roughly a year. So for those 3 years, we're at $381,000. Now we know moving forward, if Powell Falls doesn't restart, we're going to have just Junction Falls, and I'll round down a little bit. That's going to be about 80,000 a year. So times 3 years, you have 21, 22, and 23. You could just add an extra 240,000 to the 381, and you're going to be around 600,000. So, that theory that this production was going to help pay for them, one could argue it kind of is kind of held true. So again, doesn't show up on the revenue side, but it is avoided costs and it is real money. So I guess that's the good news. So that's kind of where we've been. It's what we estimated, and Army Corps was a little bigger contribution than we thought, but also we were required to do a couple more studies than we thought, but almost a wash. Maybe came out a little bit ahead with the Army Corps' contribution. So that's where we've been. And you saw that reflected too in Tracy's numbers of expenditures that kind of dinged the electric utility a little bit last year. So moving ahead, here's where we're at with our FERC schedule. Leslie's on the line and she's looking forward to filing our draft license application. It's a big momentous moment here in April, putting that together in a nice big packet. So you can see we're getting to the end of our big work for the relicensing. We're going to kind of turn it over to FERC, and they're going to be reviewing and commenting back. So a lot of the majority of the big work has been done. Well, we were feeling good about it. Everything was, the licensing was on schedule. We were going to spend a lot of money. We're going to have this all done by 2023. And then in the future, we were going to worry about decommissioning costs. Well, what happened in June of 2020, we had a flood. flood came and we went down to the Powell Falls Dam and we saw some visible damage on that dam. We knew it wasn't catastrophic, but there was visible damage on the dam. One of the wing walls was chipped off, maybe some cracking. We weren't sure how the post tensions were holding together. So FERC said, you know, we need an inspection on that dam. But in order to do an inspection, we're going to have to draw down Lake Louise. Well, here's a picture of Lake Louise after the drawdown and prior to the inspection, October 20th of last year. Here's a picture of that west wing wall on Powell Falls. You can see visible damage there. So we were able to see that was damaged. Our gate that goes up and down, you can see damage on that. A big tree or something hit that and dented that. That's going to need to be fixed. There's our trash rack, bunch of debris blocking the trash rack that doesn't allow water to flow. So this is visible stuff after we drew down the lake. So we look at that and now we see we're going to have to potentially do some investments in Powell Falls Dam if we want to refill the lake and continue to produce electricity through 2023. We met in January, I guess it was, with yourselves and the Utility Commission, and we discussed all of this. And before I get to that discussion, I will mention we have discovered there's about 200,000 cubic yards of sediment in that lake bed. In context, when we drew down Lake Louise, we lost about 8,000 cubic yards during the drawdown and estimated about 1,500 more cubic yards over the winter. So, you know, we're saying, geez, do we want to refill this lake again and then go through this one more time where we have to manage another 8,000 or 10,000 cubic yards of sediment going down the river, which I know Charter Limited and the DNR are not fans of, and the potential investment we'd have to make into the Powell Falls Dam in order to make it operable again, according to FERC. So we had the study session. We talked about 5 options. We kind of ended up on option 3, which was keep the drawdown, keep Lake Louise drawn down, fix the gate so it can open more easily. You saw the dent in that gate. Pull the turbine and clean that trash rack so we can allow additional water to flow through that dam area without compromising the dam at all. This is important, especially now we're getting to the wet season. This will be important so that lake doesn't bounce, right? We don't want Lake Louise to continue to go to fill and then drain, fill and drain, because that's when we're going to lose the sediment out of Lake Louise. So we discussed it. It is a transition from hydro relicensing to decommissioning. We didn't make any official decisions, but we said this is kind of the direction we want to go. Does anybody have any heartburn over this, or should staff continue to keep exploring that? And you said, yeah, keep exploring that. So we're here tonight. Again, we're shifting from licensing to decommissioning. All those expenses that we had estimated and talked about were all related to relicensing. We did know that the total cost of this project, including relicensing and decommissioning, was about a $1.9 million price tag. We talked about that early in this process. Ayers, who gave us that estimate, still feels comfortable with that estimate. Keeping the lake drawn down may save us $100,000 or $200,000 of sediment management, potentially, but not guaranteed. But we're now moving to a decommissioning track, which is probably going to be a parallel track with relicensing for the next 2 years, potentially.
Kevin,
if we're going to go down this track, you have a question?
Just
Yes,
the picture,
please.
the picture you got there on the last slide, it's of the sediment being moved. That is a stock photo, correct?
That's a stock photo.
Okay.
And I was looking through stock photos of sediment removal. I'm like, hey, that kind of looks like the Kinnickinnick River just below Powell Falls.
Very good. Thank you.
I would say, Patrick, that's probably a pretty good representation of what would happen if we remove sediment. That's a type of equipment that you get in the river.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good representation, but no, that is, for those watching at home and seeing that and the rumors start flying that we're in the river now, that's a stock photo.
Thank you.
I think
Good
we should
call
put a
on that.
disclaimer on there because people are going to think we're actually down there doing that.
Well, I'll just say, we'll say it loud and clear right now, that is a stock photo and nobody is in the river with any equipment. So this transition to potentially starting decommissioning earlier than 2023. So really, we were thinking about 2023 to 26. I'm going to just read this paragraph I've written down. That'll help my mind get going again. It should be noted that, these were anticipated costs in the previous scope of work. I had mentioned that here 2 minutes ago. But these projects weren't supposed to occur until 2023 to 2026. The construction costs were included in the 1.9 million anticipated expenditures for this project. It's still on track to be that, but we're moving them up potentially. So these aren't new thought about expenditures. These aren't new crazy costs. This was the project, but we're shifting some of it a little bit earlier. In order to have that happen, TRC Solutions would have to file an amendment with FERC here in the very near future. Leslie's on the call, so if we have more questions regarding that, we can see her. But in April, she would file an amendment with FERC that would allow us to disengage Powell Falls from our original FERC license. We have been in conversations with them, and they've verbally looked favorably upon that. When we do submit that, FERC then would also be able to make some decisions to allow us to clean that trash rack, fix that dam, and potentially remove the turbine. That process could take anywhere from 8 to 14 months, depending on how fast they move. Also, we also may be able to remove some sediment when this is happening as well. In order to do that, Ayers and Associates gave us an estimate for $39,562. And what they would be doing is overseeing these projects that I'm mentioning. They would oversee building a road to get sediment out, the actual removing of sediment, removing a turbine, all these projects. So I'm going to move forward. I think I have a slide for that. Here we go. The construction activities in 2021 stemming from the potential Ayers agreement would be the permit applications for the DNR to remove the sediment, construction access route. I'm going to show you that on the next slide. And then we build a road, sediment management just below Powell Falls, turbine removal, trash rack cleaning, and minor repairs in the west wing wall. So here, this is from the original decommissioning plan, and we keep looking at other routes and we keep coming back to this route. This is the best route to get equipment in and out of that dam area. That was not a pun of any kind. It's the Powell Falls Dam area. In the middle of the picture here is our wastewater treatment plant. And right behind the plant is an old quarry site there, which would be our dump site for sediment. So we're talking about building a road from the quarry site across the corner of Lake Louise. And then actually, Peter Haug from Ayers talks about how they actually can build a road or some type of rough road down the backside of that dam to allow trucks to go right over top of the dam down into the tail race below Powell Falls and begin to remove sediment out of there. That road could also be used for other sediment removal if the DNR requires us to shape some of the existing banks in the river, which I'm assuming is going to happen so they don't continue to keep falling into the river, but we'll shape them and shape them back. That could be happening in the next 18 months to 2 years. But this road could be used for a lot of that. So it's not just a one-time road. It's a road that'll be used for all of the construction and decommissioning and any future work that's planned for that area. And then maybe in the long run, it could even be used as a bike path potentially. So I'll just throw that out there. So that's not a one-time thing. There may be a longer use for that road.
Kevin,
So
I hate to interrupt.
Please do. Yes.
So go back to that picture a second, if you would.
Which one? This one?
Yeah, that one right there. There's 4 feet of sediment. I'm guessing some amount of sediment sitting there.
Yes.
Are we going to dig that out until we hit bedrock?
No. So I was talking to Pete about that too. So we lost about 8,000 cubic yards that left that. We're not going to be taking out 8,000 cubic yards. Leslie, do you remember the number that Pete said? Was it 2,000 or 3,000? 2,000? Do you remember the number that we're going to be removing below there?
Yeah, we were. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, we were estimating maybe about 3,000 cubic yards below Powell Falls each year that might need to be removed. And that's below the dam on that side. It's not talking about, doing any bank reshaping that might come in the future, but that's just the removal downstream from releases.
And
But we're
so
talking
Scott,
about going down to bedrock or some
No.
stable ground.
Are you asking in the riverbed or in the lake bed?
In the lake bed from the shore through the old Lake Louise till it gets to the dam.
Right. For that, no, right now we're just talking about removing some of the sediment below Powell Falls in the Kinnickinnick River that was released with the drawdown. And then each year as additional sediment moves down, we're estimating about 3,000 cubic yards per year. And then in the lake bed itself, we're maybe going to be doing some bank shaping in the future, but that would be a different application, different purpose, more on the restoration stabilization side of things, not the sediment removal that we're talking about for 21.
Okay, maybe I'm not asking my question right, but we're going to build a road from the bank to the dam.
Right.
How are we going to build that road? Because if you go back to one of those pictures Kevin just had, there's 4 or 5 feet of sediment. We can't just throw boards over the top of the sediment and drive over there.
I think Pete was talking about ways to stabilize that sediment. I don't know exactly how they do that, Leslie, but
Yeah, I'm not the engineer in the room either on that one, but yeah, there wouldn't be any sediment removal prior to construction of that road. There would be some engineered design and reinforcement, and it seems like there's a few different options that Ayers has been talking about of ways to get that across, and kind of depending on what we find when we get out there of how stable and dried out it is this year versus how much needs to be reinforced. But there would be no removal that I'm aware of for the construction of that access road. Removal of sediment for the construction of the access road.
And Scott,
okay.
to give you
scope fast, I don't know.
There's going to be some heavy equipment, so it'll be reinforced in some way, but somehow they're going to get it stabilized.
Yeah, I was going to give you some scope, Scott, too, of what does it entail and how long does it take to remove 3,000 cubic yards of sediment below Powell Falls? And I think Pete said about 10 working days, 10 to 14 working days. So, and Mark Spafford, do you have your hand raised? I'm sorry,
Yep.
I have my pictures over there. So,
Oh, that's good. But just back to Scott's question. We put in causeways. So the business that I'm in, I think you know what it is. We put in causeways like that, and there's a way to do that by using a filter fabric over the top, and then some type of a haul road is built. It could be out of mats. It could be out of some type of a gravel, if you will, that's put on top of that filter fabric temporarily. And pretty amazing how you can distribute that and get right across there without having to do a lot of removal underneath. So the question that I had was, so we're trying to get across there because we know there's going to be more sediment coming through, and then there's going to be floating curtains and things like that that's going to be capturing that, and then it's going to be collected somehow, and then so many times a year we're going to have to get in there and clean it. Is that what I'm picking up?
I do know that I don't know if sediment removal is in place of the barriers or in addition to the barriers, Leslie.
It would be, it would be it would be a paired thing. So for this year, there are no barriers in place right now. So this year it would be getting in there, doing some cleanup, and getting some of those barriers installed. And then once those are installed, those sediment traps essentially, you would need to then go in there and clean out what's behind it. So that's part of that annual sediment removal estimate of cleaning and maintaining those barriers.
I can find one positive of leaving that dam structure in there, right? I mean, obviously that's kind of a sediment barrier in itself, right? I mean, the sediment can only get through the small openings. So then until that thing stabilizes, and then when the lake bed stabilizes, then we get rid of the dam itself. And that's where some of the avoidance of sediment removal may come in. versus taking the dam out and then taking out half of the lake sediment. Any other questions or comments yet? Before I do my wrap-up slide.
Oh, I'll wait, Kevin, until you might answer my question. Go ahead.
Okay, let me see, I'm locked up here, hold on. So over here, I don't know, I got stuff moving around. My slide's locked up. So hold on, let me hit escape. I'll go to it right here and see if I can get this. All right, I think we're back with it. So here's the takeaways. Yeah, this is the last slide, so then we'll go to questions. So here's what I wanted you to take away from this presentation tonight. So we're within our budget on relicensing. Again, it's a lot of money, but we're going to spend around $700,000 when you get through the last 2 years and add on a little bit more there. We're in the 600s. So that's where we're headed. Starting decommissioning early, but the dam won't come out until early 25, 26. We'd like to remove Powell Falls from our original FERC license. The DNR then will be the governing agency for that structure, that facility. Activity in 2021 that may include a turbine removal, trash rack cleaning, minor wing wall repair, a road build and sediment removal, and other minor activities. And then planned activities to be moved up. That's really what it is. I mean, these were planned activities, but we're moving them up. And the hydros will produce about $600,000 in avoided costs from 2018 to 2023. We shouldn't lose sight of that either. So that is my presentation, and those were the takeaways. I'll leave them there if there are more questions now, or concerns or comments. So really what they asked us tonight in the resolution is to allow staff to move ahead with having TRC file an amendment to FERC to remove Powell Falls from original license, and then to have Ayers and Associates take on these activities that I've outlined here in bullet point 4. So that's what the resolution is asking for. And it also clarifies the fact that we will stick to all the regular spending limits for accounting purposes. So we're not asking for any authority to spend above and beyond our limits that are set right now by city policy. So we've discussed it, we've talked about it. I'm hoping we can move ahead with this, but this is to the will of the Utility Advisory Board and the City Council.
Go ahead, Mark.
I have a handful of questions, Kevin. I'll start with one, and then if someone else has one, I don't want to hog the mic here.
Do you need my slides anymore, or can I get off of that?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so
One of my biggest questions is, if we have another June 2020, what is the plan of retaining that 200,000 cubic yards of soil?
That's an interesting question. I had a statistic here from the other day of how much went down in the last flood. So let me give you that. So I've got it in my notes here. Hold on.
While he's doing that, I would point everybody to, if you're not already there, page 42 of the packet has kind of 5 points, and that is really the specifics of what we're looking at resolving here. So.
See, I've got it, Mark. So just for context, though, in the last flood, we lost about 16,500 cubic yards in the last flood.
That was when it was closed. So right now it's open.
Well, that went over the top of the dam. So.
Okay.
Yeah, but to your point, but I can tell you right now, we had that 1-inch rainstorm last week because, well, we know this. We had a 2-inch rainstorm last fall, and the lake filled back up, went over the top. So we weren't really sure about what is the limit for before flooding. I went down there. It was still raining a little bit right at the end of that 1-inch rainstorm last week, was it? And I took a picture. There was about that much light coming through that 6x6 opening. So 1 inch it could handle a 1 inch rainstorm in 12 hours. The channel itself was about 90% full. And the 6x6 opening was just handling that 1 inch rain. So if it goes, and that sediment was breaking off those banks at that point in time as well. But if it goes to 2 inches, Mark, it's going over the top. So you're going to have similar conditions you had during the last flood.
But if we clear the trash rack out, we're going to get more flow capacity.
Yes, so we can get more flow. That's making probably more than double the flow capacity if you clean the trash rack and remove the turbine. That's the goal there. So then now all of a sudden you can handle a 2.5 or 3 inch rainstorm, which is most of them. But to Mark's point, it's not the 6, 8, and 8 inch rainstorm.
I guess my only other question, you've all heard me talk before, and I won't go over it again. But I think I share a similar sentiment. We're an advisory board. That's all we are. The city council has made these decisions. The city council will get to vote on these decisions. I even read in our handout on the bottom of page 6, it says these options 1 through 5 were presented at the joint workshop with the Common Council and Utility Advisory Board on January 19th of 2021. Meeting participants agreed to allow staff to proceed with pursuing option number 3. That wasn't actually true. Again, that was a city council decision. We were not asked our opinion on that.
To your point, Mark, I remember the mayor did say city council, what do you think about this? So that's fair. Yeah. That's fair.
So I'm just coming down the road with
that's fair.
City council made a decision. City council made a decision at the beginning of even removing the dams. They didn't go with what the UAB had offered, et cetera. I don't want to get into those weeds. But the biggest thing for me is the cost. We all got slapped with this natural gas cost. And the last thing that I want to see, and I've talked to a number of people, and nobody ever raised their hand and volunteered to pay for this, right? Oh, I got all this extra money. I got my COVID money. I'll donate that to the city because I want to see this dam removed. We all know the story of the partnership, right? So if you could just speak, or anybody, Scott, if you want to speak towards, I read through this and I don't see a lot of money. I see some Trout Unlimited money for the future. And then I saw a 2030 date in there. So I guess I'll be quiet, Kevin, and unless you want to ask me a question, I want to know where the money's coming from before I'm going to vote yes on this.
Let me give 2 money points, and they're not going to answer your question fully, but it's a little sprinkle. It's a little salt and pepper here. There will be about a $400,000 DNR grant available. So that's one, and there's a decent chance we would get that. 2, the KCC, I think it was even in the memo that we wrote, that they committed to paying for half of the decommissioning plan, which was $120,000. So there's $60,000 there. So there's 2 little pieces, and I know the KCC and other groups continue to work on raising this money. So, but maybe I'll pass it down to Scott Morissette. I know Scott Simpson's on this call too, and I know Scott can speak more eloquently about the patience part and the money part than I can on this. So if Mr. Morissette, if you would like to go first, and then if Mr. Simpson wants to chime in, that'd be great too.
Well, first comment, I want to go back, Mark, and the rest of the advisory board, and for that matter, all of the advisory committees and the plan commission and everybody who makes recommendations to the city council. Don't sell yourself short that the city council is just making decisions based on whatever the whim is. We look to these meetings. In fact, there's a lot of times when we will, I will sometimes tell my fellow council members, go back and watch the utility commission. I will go to the plan commission. I was just at the last plan commission, as a matter of fact, and I watched the interaction on those committees to see what the feel was and what the mood was. I know that I know that there were some hard feelings about what the city council passed, the original thing that happened, but what that really represented was an amalgamation of council members, the Kinney River group that was put together, and the UAB. So it was a mix. It was a mix of everything together. So don't sell yourself short that it's just going to be the city council making the decision. As far as the funding goes, one of the things, and I think I've been just about as vocal as everybody about the funding and some of our stakeholders urging or sending letters requiring a study, and then not turning around and open up their checkbook. So I've been frustrated by that as well. The thing that we have heard consistently, and I'm glad to see that it's starting to happen, but the thing that we've heard consistently is we can't raise money until we have a date certain so that we can go to the groups and ask for the grants, ask for the different things. They're starting to happen. Are they happening as fast as I want to see them happen? No, but ask everybody, including my wife. I'm not a very patient person at times. So that's not happening at the speed that any of us would like. We'd all like to have them come with checks and bring the big huge check and we'll shake hands and get a picture in the paper. That's just not going to happen. But I am hopeful and I'm appreciative of what's happened up to this point, with an expectation from it is our intent from on the page. Did I make out there?
Scott, you're breaking up a little bit at the very end. Oh, we might have lost Mr. Morissette. Looks like he's getting the old yellow triangle. So
That point then, and to Mark's point as well, as far as the money goes, hopefully the fundraising starts to come through and those sorts of things. But when do the ratepayers start getting notified that, hey, this might hit your bill because we'll have to pay for this somehow? Because I mean, I got my gas bill and I was shocked, and then I went immediate, you could just scroll through the Facebook comments and people were just livid that they weren't notified in advance that this was happening. Even just some communications from the gas company that, hey, this thing happened down in Texas, this is affecting us, blah, blah, blah. When do we start notifying ratepayers of, hey, if we don't raise enough money, or if this public-private partnership doesn't raise enough money, you all get to help us flip the bill on this? Like, at what point does that become a reality and sort of tell everybody, and wake them up, I guess, that this could be a reality?
So Kellen, I think I did that exercise maybe a year ago where I took a $2 million bond and I put it out over 10 years and how that would impact a residential customer. And I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it was like $1 a month, just something like that. So, but it's, real money.
Just
I remember correctly.
One quick comment to add to Kellen is that, I remember the discussions, right? Sitting and listening to the city council and listening to the other stakeholders that were in on it. And it seemed really evident. It seemed like a gentleman's agreement to me. And I think it did to others that I've talked to, that, this partnership was going to happen and it was going to be, everything was going to be up front. And then at the very end, we heard, and I wrote it down here, that there will be no general property tax levy funds used. Well, I think there's a lot of more pockets available of money, of city money, where this could come out of. And maybe I was just interpreted it wrong. So with that, I think, Scott, if you have something you want to say about that, I don't know. I've just really struggled with this.
Mr. Simpson, do you want to talk to the group about maybe some other rocks we're turning over looking for money and where that's at?
Well, I addressed a couple of things and I'll be happy to answer questions if I can any better than how they've been answered. But to Mr. Wells Mangold's point, I've been saying it for 3 years. I mean, we've been paying for this. This has always been an obligation of the utility. This is not new news. So we already have incurred a number of expenses which have already been expensed through the utility. I mean, you can make the argument that we otherwise could have contributed that money to our bottom line or something else. You know, it's a bit more complex than that, given that we're a regulated utility, and if you didn't have the expense, then you wouldn't get the rate of return. And so I mean, it flows a number of ways through. I don't think anybody, and I'm guessing that's, but maybe we should clarify. The relicensing expense is an expense whether we continue to operate the hydros or not. The community discussion involved, would it actually be more expensive to relicense, you know, fully, so to speak, than to do the methodology that the compromise, or however people want to characterize it. So in other words, instead of $700,000, it could have been a $2 million license. And yes, you would have ended up with 2 hydros that you could have operated for, you know, another 20 years each. But we kind of went down that scenario planning, and the community made its decision about how it wanted to go. So the hydro expense, the relicensing expense, I think has been disclosed for months and months through lots of presentations. The default is the electric utility, and so you all have a fiduciary responsibility to guide the council as best you can, or wave the flag or get their attention however you feel is appropriate. But I've been saying, you know, and even when we had that discussion at the council meeting, I don't, maybe I just go back and watch the video, but you know, the council was talking about no tax levy, and I think the question was raised even at the time by council members, well, what does that mean? And I believe I said that means no general property tax levy, but it could incur electric utility, wastewater utility, stormwater utility, Lake George Rehabilitation District, you know, federal grants, state grants, fundraising, you name it. Certainly, I think, to Mr. Spafford's point, there's not only a gentleman's agreement, there's a memorandum of understanding between the KCC that they're gonna, you know, basically put their money where their mouth is, to say it not eloquently. I know Kevin was hoping for eloquent words, but so, and I think the other thing is the grand bargain, or the great compromise, or the gentleman's agreement, was that the lower dam is going to give these groups the opportunity to demonstrate that they can raise money. And if they can't, then the UAB and the council is certainly going to have some different decisions when it comes to, you know, authorizing the removal of the upper dam. So that's been said also in the community. And I think, frankly, you get some consternation on the stakeholders side, because that's what their biggest fear is at the end of the day, the council's not going to vote to take out the upper dam. And frankly, you know, they have an opportunity to demonstrate that this is as easy as they said it might be, right? So if they can raise millions of dollars, or even $1 million or $2 million over the next 36 months, that certainly will send a signal to all of you as decision makers that, yeah, there is really this outside money, so to speak, coming in. And it may not be outside money in other people's definition, and I might be in that boat. You know, federal money is non-local, but it's still money that comes from us. So where the money is coming from is the kind of avoided, we're going to continue to run that net income or net position statement on the hydros for as long as we have them. So even now that the lower's out, we're going to continue to track the revenue. And I think in a number of council members' mind, and maybe some of you in the UAB, that money is being used basically to try to pay for the planned obsolescence of this asset. And that certainly can be debated too by people with a reasonable mind, whether that's really 80,000 or 60,000 or zero that you want to count. But it's coming from those, that's revenue we already have. So it's not rate impact that we're asking for more from the ratepayers. And frankly, you saw the utilities' ability this year, and I think it'll be pressure for them to do that, not in perpetuity, but we cut expenses considerably this year in utilities, and then we basically foregoed 160,000 in revenue because we just thought we shouldn't grab it just because we can. So I mean, that's really your role in the UAB, is to keep minding the store as far as our expenditures. But I think that's where it's going to have the most impact, is can we keep this project at 1.9 and not let it grow to 3.1 for what is a basic removal and restoration. And then also that 1.9 project doesn't include millions of dollars of items that the community is hoping to see. And I would argue they really have no chance of getting council funding without significant outside funding coming forward. So you got a $700,000 investment plus a significant amount of the for the deconstruction, I guess we'd say. So that $1.9 million is still kind of the number that the electric utility could be in for. And it depends, it will depend, Mr. Spafford, on how we decide to slice and dice it. So if there happens to be wastewater utility armoring, well, then I think there'll be a good discussion about, is that really a wastewater cost? They saved some money by putting shallow pipes in, so to speak. Now that they may be exposed, should we put some armoring in? Would that be a cost of the wastewater utility, not the electric utility? And so that's a reasonable debate. There's some stormwater things that I think you could argue would be stormwater utility. And certainly we are actively seeking earmarks in any way we can get them. So either at the state or federal level, it sounds like the federal government is maybe reaching an agreement to put federal earmarks back in play on projects. And so certainly we would be asking what amounts to our two representatives and two senators to see if any of them would be up for an earmark, which could help bring some non-local money. And then we're putting a lot of pressure on the DNR to see if 400 is really all they can bring to the table. 400 is a good amount, but it's been indicated as a priority river in a priority state for rivers. And so we're looking forward to that. So that's a long-winded way of saying clearly the default is through electric rates. I mean, that's how we operate our finances here at the city. This is an enterprise fund. This is most clearly related to the enterprise fund. Any money that we can get to offset that certainly is a benefit directly to the ratepayers in what I would consider avoided future rate increases. But we're also doing, as you did earlier tonight, we are working hard on the economic development, because one of the ways we can keep rates steady or even bring some pressure down is to build the customer base beyond the residential. So I appreciate the effort to take a little risk there on the new rate structure. So it's a big complicated pie that we're kind of baking together. And I do think the fundraising, I think it's fair to say the fundraising appears to be a little behind where we are as a community and where the UAB is, where the council is, and having to make decisions. So that's a risk right now that has to be measured. I think I don't have any reservations about recommending the path that we've got forward here, because I think other paths, frankly, cost the electric ratepayers, have a potential to have a greater risk on the ratepayer than this way forward. So in other words, it may be the best least option or the least best option from a ratepayer perspective, irrespective of our feelings about fundraising and other things.
Scott, do you know, I was reading through one of the documents and it mentioned that, there were certain fundraising milestones that needed to be identified. It was on page, well, in our huge packet of 111 pages, is page 53.
Yep, I've got that.
It talks about fundraising milestones. Like, I guess, how are they keeping everybody informed of what they're doing, what they're going after? I mean, I guess,
So,
like, what information are they sharing with everybody?
So we have access directly to the leadership, including the fundraising chair. We have meetings about every 2 weeks. We are included in correspondence to legislators. When that's done, there's not a whole lot of formal correspondence at this point, but there's a lot of informal conversations. And so that's how, when we say we, I guess that's me, not necessarily the UAB. So that might be a good way for us to kind of increase the trust and transparency too, is to try to get a little bit more feedback, and maybe they can come and present directly to the UAB. They came, Councilmember Morissette, do you remember KCC been at the council meeting twice, I think, in the last 5 months?
Yeah, I think so. I remember Judy being there shortly after she came. Oh no, Duke was here, and then Duke and Judy were at the council meeting the next week, presenting the same thing. But then I do remember Judy coming at another time. So I believe I've seen him 3 times, once at UAB and twice at council.
Yeah. So the first, Kellen, the first milestone is this half of the decommissioning plan. And so again, I'd say they're behind the milestone. We're about to pay for that in the next, 90 days. And so I guess they're not technically behind, because they could, come up with the 60,000 here in the next 90 days. But that's the first milestone, I guess, in the LOA that I can recall. I do agree with them that getting some more date certains is going to help them on the fundraising side, just knowing from the grant fundings that I've put in for. So that's, there still is skepticism that this, even after all of this dialogue, all the discussion, all the resolutions, there's still some skepticism from some stakeholders and some fund holders that we're actually going to pull the plug on the dam. Like, they're worried that there's going to be a last minute push, and that we're going to decide to put $1 million investment in, and we're going to go full force into fixing up the dam. And so, I'm asking you all to have a little more trust and patience. And I've certainly been spending time with the stakeholders, telling them to do the same, that, but we're gonna have to pick up the urgency. There's no question that we've got to pick up the urgency on the fundraising. It's making this a lot more difficult, and it's pulling down trust, because I think the council would share the UAB's concerns about the urgency on fundraising.
I think the other thing that I just keep in the back of my mind too is the presentation about the biosolids and what we're going to have to do with that, and if there is a facility that needs to be constructed down the road, that's another pretty hefty expense as well. There's just a lot of really big things, it seems like, coming down the pipe, and just how everything gets paid for. Just making sure it's still like an affordable place for residents to live, is like really key.
Yeah, and the business plan, the business planning for wastewater and water, which is upcoming, and for electric, which has been completed. I mean, that's not going to make everybody calm, but we have some pretty solid understanding of the electric operation and what our ongoing and future expenses. The UAB in particular has been instrumental in basically refreshing the whole electric system. I mean, we are from a capital system that, you know, the hydro is the dog of the family, so to speak. It's everything else is in pretty good shape, relatively speaking, and our big assets, the substations are like new. So the water, wastewater, I'll be back at other council meetings or other UAB meetings and council meetings, because we've got to talk about how you know, what you want and what you need and how you can afford to pay for it and keep the rates at a reasonable level. Or if we can even work the rates down. In the case of wastewater, where I think we're above average from a rate, how we can work that back down towards an average rate structure.
An unfair question, Kevin, but
No, there's no unfair questions. You can just let me have it.
yeah. One of these days I have to get over this, but if it were to go a full vote of no from the UAB, what is another option that we have? Or maybe we don't have another option at this point. Because right now I am going to vote no on this, because I appreciate what Mr. Simpson is saying, that, you know, I love to trust him. He's a great guy, but it's not him that I'm trusting. It's the people that have said publicly that they're on board with this. So that's where I'm at. That's your gut check. That's where I'm at. So
Right. So, you know, you asked about what would be the ramifications. One, we'd have to come back to you because it's over a $5,000 expenditure is to fix the dam. Right. So we'd have to do some investment in that. We had an estimate, I think, of about 100,000 for that. So that'd be the first thing then.
Well, Kevin, I mean, Mark, to your point is if the UAB voted against this, I think that would tell the council that you're wanting them to take a pause and look at other options. At a minimum, you're saying you don't like the option that's on the table. You know, certainly the UAB could offer another option. The one option that's, I guess, the most likely kind of plan B is to stay with the idea that we're going to not pull the lower dam out of the FERC and leave that into that process. Potentially that means refilling the lake and kind of fixing up the hydro for a few years and getting some more hydro. But there's as you've seen in all these memos, seems like almost limitless options within those. So if the UAB votes no, you'll be sending a message to the council that you think there must be a better option out there. You have the luxury as an advisory board of volunteers to say it's not really up to us to find the better option. We just don't like the one that we have. So that's fair. That's the way it is. I would suggest to you that staff would love to bring you something that they feel is better, but we think this is the best option. So, but if you vote against it, I think you can, as a group, if you vote against it, you're sending the message that you want a different option. If you individually vote against it and you want to send specific messages to council, you can do that either in your vote or you can do it in correspondence.
So Mark, you know, we at the study session we had 5 options. So we looked at them. Staff looked at them. We looked at it with TRC and AIRS. We talked to our stakeholders at DNR and FERC, and we keep coming back to option 3 is kind of what's in front of you tonight. So we have looked at the other options. We have bounced those options off of key groups, and option 3 just seems to make the most sense, though again, you still have the freedom to do what you need to do, but that's where we're at. Tim?
Kevin, my comment is I'm fully committed to option 3, except the commitment for the downstream sediment cleanup. That could be never ending. And I mean, who's to say how much sediment was going through those dams when they're full? We've had those 2 dams have been sediment traps for 100 years. Maybe they weren't given the credit for that, but they're full, and so they don't hold any more sediment. So anything that comes in, I'm making an assumption here. Anything that comes into them is going to go out, whether the dam is in full and in place, or if we're sitting there in our situation with Powell Falls right now. So, you know, how much liability should we have to assume for whatever gets past them right now? And I think in our earlier information packet, but I didn't see it on your slides, we're going to do seeding.
Today, actually.
Yeah, so that's going to be a very important thing to get to get vegetation established as soon as possible, in my mind.
So Tim, Leslie's on the call too, and she was on this call with myself and about 4 folks from the DNR about 2.5 weeks ago. I can't know, time flies. And we talked about sediment, and I don't know, 3 months ago, they seemed pretty hot on us getting that sediment out of there. And on the last call, they just weren't as hot on us getting the sediment out of there. You know, one thing we're afraid of, Tim, is that we ignore it. And they say, the DNR would say, clean up a mile of the river. I mean, hopefully that's not going to be the case. I don't think we would just take that sitting down, but you know, that's one of the mild concerns is, you know, if we don't at least address something, could the request be greater than what we want? There's a potential though that just sediment barriers down below the river could suffice at this point. There is that small potential that I saw a little crack in that possibility with the DNR in the last call. Leslie, am I characterizing that correctly? John, would you let Leslie speak to that? So I want to make sure I hit that pretty close. I think I did.
Yeah, so,
Did.
oh, can you hear me now okay?
Yes.
Yeah, to the sediment, you know, it's trying to do the right thing as far as being good stewards for the Kinney, and the concern is more, I guess, the slugs of sediment. So if you have uncontrolled larger releases, certainly at more critical times for trout, those are the main concerns. But yes, and also with the, the barrier, even when you put that in, at some point you'll need to maintain the barrier. Yeah, you need to clean it out. If you put a barrier in and you never clean it out, it does no good because the sediment's just going to go downstream anyway. So again, it's, I think the sediment removal, the access road, these are things that are all part of the overall big picture of ultimate decommissioning and removal. And again, timeline wise, a couple of those activities are getting potentially, pushed up if you approve them for sooner rather than later, just because of the timing of the flood and the drawdown that we had in 21 or in 2020.
Tim, next is going to be bank shaping, right? They may be as early as maybe next January, February, March, potentially when it's frozen. And we're going to need a road to get in and out of there then too.
No, I totally agree that we should continue doing these modifications as soon as possible. And yes, I mean, sediment traps, whatever, but we all know as much as you'd like to think that they're 100% perfect, they're not. And who's the judge of how much, well, like you say, go down and clean up another mile of the river. I mean, that's my only concern, that if we're signing off of every year we're going to do sediment cleanup, I mean, some of the other stakeholders, they're pretty adamant on what that might mean, so there's the open end of the checkbook. But I think I probably sat in on this longer than any of the board members, advisory board members, other than staff. To me, the 1.9 million, if we can get out of here with that, we're probably doing good. So anyway, that's my opinion.
I went over a lot of things with myself before this meeting, as far as rehashing the workshop and knowing the concerns that were brought up. And I'll share one of the things that I was concerned about, and that's that after the workshop there was a public announcement about Lake Louise being drawn down and that it would essentially stay. And I don't recall exactly the wording of it. It's something I saw on Facebook, but I was surprised by that. And I'm wondering, the council was unanimous in their thinking after the workshop. There wasn't a vote taken, but since that time, has there been any official action related? No.
This is it tonight. So this is the beginning of official action.
Okay.
So we took no official action.
I know that there's hesitation, and Mark's stated his stance very clearly, and I share some of his concerns. I'm less concerned about the money than the what ifs, as far as the physical entity. But one of what I keep coming back to is, Kevin, I do trust you, and I'm going to say that. I mean, I may disagree with you sometime, but in general, I trust you. And I feel like it may be an uphill battle to go against a council that's expressed a unanimous opinion, for good or bad. That's just the truth of the situation. And knowing that, I was excited when we went out to the dam and we were told, if we clear this rack, if we pull the turbine, if we do a few things that are much easier than, full dam removal, and they were reasonable things. If we do that, it'll improve water flow. So when it does rain, that water doesn't necessarily need to go over the top. I'm not looking to be a compromised position here, but that's where I'm at the moment. Is I'd like to get to the point where we can get that dam as it is, with a few improvements that put us in a good place. That's, to me, the reasonable, from my perspective, that's the reasonable spot to be in, where we make a decision rather than drawing it out, and get those few steps done as quickly as possible, so that there isn't an insurance situation. So I don't know if that's good enough for you, Mark, but I don't see us changing that many minds, unless you see something I haven't thought of yet. And I don't see that as a failure necessarily. I think it's just where we're at. So,
and just to be clear, I'm trying to stop this. Okay, I've expressed to Kevin, I expressed a number of people my concerns. If we get a big log jam in front of that opening, we're in serious trouble, because it's going to fill up fast. I haven't even seen a plan on how they're even going to remove the dam itself, the concrete, and how that's going to be restored. I haven't seen any of that, and maybe it's out there, but I haven't seen it. And how much is that going to cost? And where's the money to restore the bed, and to do all the improvements that the city wants to do? So I just think, we went to try to hook the horse up to the cart, and the cart started to roll away from us, and we just haven't got it hooked up yet. That's my only concern. I'm not trying to stop the removal of Powell. That has been decided. It's going. But we're moving. Unfortunately, we got put into a position because of the June flood, in a position that is not comfortable for me. So go ahead, Scott. I think you had something to say.
Well, I don't know if I've got anything to say. I guess I'm curious, if, and Patrick, maybe need some more clarification on what you're talking about, because if we want to avoid river bounce, then I think we've got to get in there and get that trash rack cleaned out. That's one of the things that I think will do that. But I just don't think that there's an appetite by the council, and I would say we've telegraphed our position. I'm in that camp. I'm not in favor of refilling Lake Louise, and the reason I'm not is because it automatically creates mobility in that sediment right away. I mean, it's all going to be mobile again. I mean, some of it today is mobile, but not to the extent, and I'm probably swerving too far out of my own lane here, but not to the extent it is if we fill it back up. If we fill it back up, I just feel like we're starting over. Are we going to generate power then? Are we going to turn that on and generate power? I suppose if we do fill it, but at this point, I don't think there's an appetite to refill Lake Louise at all. And I think, I mean, Tim has expressed his opinion that he's in favor of number 3. I don't know where Matt is or Kellen, but I just don't think refilling Lake Louise, based on all the information we've gotten from the experts and taking into consideration, those stakeholders, refilling Lake Louise is not a direction that makes sense for going that way. As far as where's the program, where's the plan? Well, we did that in the corridor plan. I mean, that's the plan that's laid out for where things are going. We're not going to, we being the city or we being public utility, are not going to fund parks over there or walking bridges or pavilions. That's up to the community to bring through KCC and ultimately bring it to the council. Those plans are there. Removing the dam, I think Administrator Simpson said it pretty well, is ultimately going to fall on us. I would, from my position, I would change that a little bit to say the city has no choice but to be the safety net for those expenses. But we are looking for Corps of Engineers. We've talked to our state legislators about trying to get something. Oh, shoot.
It's frozen.
Yeah, it's okay.
So it's frozen up. Pat, can I answer? Scott, are you back? You want to keep going? I was just going to chime in.
No, I was just going to go through the list of people who are starting to step up and
yeah,
state legislators and different things. So that's I guess my comment. Go ahead.
I want to hear what you were going to say, Kevin, but
yeah,
does somebody have solution 3 in front of them? It was a fairly simple reading.
Yes.
So to keep the Powell Falls impoundment drawn down in the current state, but fix the gate and pull the turbine. But it's been modified, I think. Something.
But that's the spirit of it.
Right.
And Mark, knowing your concerns about a larger event, I mean, are you in agreement that those steps, pulling the turbine, cleaning out the trash gate, those things, I mean, that does put us in a better position than we're currently at, doesn't it? I mean, or is that a wrong assumption?
I can't make that assumption because look what the business that I've been in for 34 years, and we pay big time for accidental floods, incidental, whatever you want to call them. So keeping our fingers crossed. I mean, it felt really good the other day when we had the melt off.
Yeah.
We had just an inch of rain, but the spring melt happened already. I mean, that's making me feel better, but
Yeah, we're in a better position.
yeah.
Pat, could I take a second and just?
Yep.
I'll just finish. I'll finish with this and then we'll just see what happens. Okay. So as the utility director, I don't really have a dog in this hunt. My dog in the hunt is my fiduciary responsibility to the utility. So I'm always looking at it from what is the best, most effective way to get something done and the most efficient and affordable way to do something for our ratepayers. I really look at it through that lens, and that's the honest truth. Am I pained by the expenses and that the fact that we don't have checks coming in? I'd be lying if I said no, I wasn't pained by that. I'm pained by that. But I do trust Scott Simpson, and I know he's working hard to find money, and my fingers are crossed that can happen. But do I have a little anxiety from the fact we don't see it yet? Yes. But looking at all the options available, knowing all the players, the FERC, the DNR, what it would mean tonight if we decided to refill the lake, and then how we'd have to re-engage FERC. We'd have to fix the dam. We'd have to fix the gate. We'd have to have a new plan. I mean, that sets off a whole another engagement back with FERC in a track that we weren't headed down. I mean, it can be done, but there's other players in there besides just me or us or the council deciding what to do too. It's going to impact FERC and the DNR and the stakeholders. So my mind is on the fiduciary responsibility to our ratepayers and doing it the most responsible way while fulfilling the desires of the community to get rid of Powell Falls. That's where I'm at. I have no other dog in this hunt. So that's all I've got.
All right. Well, I would entertain a motion at this time.
I don't time
I
the
move
motion.
to, go ahead.
No, Tim, I
No, go ahead, Tim.
I think it'd be appropriate if it came from you.
Okay, so I move to approve option number 3.
Is that sufficient?
Yeah, I'll just read the title, which is a resolution for affirming the path for continued progress on hydroelectric project for Powell Falls and Junction Falls facilities in that resolution.
Okay. Looking for a second.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay, we got Kellen on that. So
Okay. Mr. Chairman, given the discussion that's taken place here, I think it would be good. I also think it would help maybe send the message that others are looking for if we had a roll call vote.
I have no problem with that.
For a roll call.
So this is a first for me. Should we just go down the roll call and yay or nay?
Actually, it might be. I would suggest that maybe Lene would want to take a roll call vote. Then she can announce the vote after it's done.
Yeah. Okay. But instructions for us to vote yay or nay when your name is called. So.
All right. Toom?
Yay.
Richter?
Yay.
Swanson? Stafford?
That'd be a nay, no.
Wells Mangold?
Yay.
Bernie?
Yay.
Morset?
Yes.
All right. Motion passes. We have approved a resolution to essentially move ahead with option 3, maintaining the drawdown and moving forward accordingly. So I would like to see how quickly we can move through the rest of this meeting.
Real quick,
Go ahead, Kevin.
real quick. I think we've got one more resolution we have to do, and then I think we can about put our big red bow on this thing. So the last resolution is a recommend award for the directional boring contract on page 60. And just real quickly, I can tell you right now that we got a great bid on our directional boring for $117,000. The top bid was $232,000. This bid is well below our budgeted amount of money. Wayne Cyberling did a background check with this company, Kramer Services Group, in the amount of $117,299 for boring services for fiber optic cables in the city over the next 3 years. We're happy with the bid. We're happy with the contractor, and it's a great price. So we just need a resolution passed to award that bid to that contractor. The resolution is in your packet.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we pass the resolution approving award of the 2021 through 2023 directional boring projects.
I'll second.
Thank
Do
you.
you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, good. Anyone?
Kevin, I'm curious as to why we are, and I see it's a future contract project, but why are we expecting that we would go through Woodridge when that's not in the city?
It's a fiber optic connection at some point to connect point A to point B. So I wish I could speak more eloquently to that too, but I can't. Other than the fact I know it's the plan to connect 2 points. So there might be a better route, Scott. I didn't make that routing map, but
I don't know why we would start providing services to the town of Troy.
we won't, but I'm aware of.
Mr. Westhouse, do we provide electric to that neighborhood?
So Woodridge, there might be a couple services out there, so that might be the case as well.
Yeah, I don't suspect this is.
No, we're not serving
prospective.
anything outside of our service territory.
All right, we have a motion that's been seconded. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'm going to return to the hand vote this time. So those in favor of passing the resolution for the bid award, please vote in favor by showing your hand at this time. All right, that's unanimous, so no need for the opposition. There we go. We have approved that one, and moving on. Kevin, can we get through the rest quickly, or?
Yes, real quick. So Wayne, are you on the call tonight? You want to talk about Woodridge, Wayne, real quick? I know Wayne's here, and I think Wayne might have a real specific answer to that.
Yes, I brought Wayne in.
Oh.
Unmute him. There he goes.
I'm dying to hear it.
I was trying to unmute and I couldn't do anything in my role here, sitting in my chair. So, yes, these are existing customers that we are feeding in Woodridge area presently now. This is nothing new additional. This is 1979 aged cable in that neighborhood. So it's just upgrading older utilities in this area.
So yeah, to Mr. Morse's point, yes, serving them.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, we've covered points 6 and 7. We are on to number 8. Is Ron going to be tackling this, or Kevin?
No, I would say we'd skip Ron, but I saw Ron's. He has 3 slides.
Okay.
He's going to hit this in 90 seconds. And Ron has been sitting here since 6:30. I would hate to tell him now we didn't need you. That would really be bad.
Agreed. Agreed.
So
right.
Ron, why don't you go ahead and give us a real brief update on our COVID project?
Okay, I don't know, Lenny, if you have the slides, but I just pulled some stuff off the state lab of health. I don't know, I can bring it up quick here.
John. Oh,
What's
I have it too, Ron.
Go ahead,
Yep,
Lene.
yep, I have it. Oh, thanks, John. I just have to share it.
So as Ron gets going, I wanted this on here because this has come up at the last 2 council meetings. And I thought it'd be good just to hear from Ron just briefly on this.
I'll get through it as quick as I can here.
Can you see it yet or no?
No.
No, not yet. Okay, sorry about that. Selected. Okay. Should be able to see it now, I'm guessing.
Okay. All right, we got it, Lene.
Okay.
So if you're looking at the first slides here are, the first slides is just on the right is River Falls service area. On the left is just Wisconsin Rapids. It's kind of a little hard to see. The top chart is actually the gene copies in the wastewater influent for River Falls, and then on the bottom of that bottom chart, that graph is actual positives in the community from the medical testing. And you can see that the medical testing and the gene copies from the wastewater do not coincide. At least they did for a while there, but we've had some spikes at the end of the last 2 months that doesn't show up in testing. And, you know, I think if you go to the next slide, Lene. So here's pretty much a description off the state website as to why they're doing it. I don't know if they're there yet. I mean, it's still a work in progress. The whole theory of it is to detect, you know, these elevated levels in communities before they necessarily show up in the testing at, you know, at the medical testing. I think there's quite a bit of work to do on that yet. It's still a learning process. You're still going through data. They're still developing test methods. And I just kind of summarize that at the end on the last slide. So if you could flip to the last one, Lene. So, you know, this testing is not meant to replace medical testing. The testing, like I said, is pretty new. The sampling and testing methods are still being refined. There's work to do, and results gathered now will be disseminated for years. So today's research, I mean, it'll be going through for years from now, and hopefully in the future, this research you're doing today in real time will actually have some very positive effects, and it can be applied in a variety of, whether it's diseases or whatever comes along in the future. So any questions, I can answer them quick.
So Ron, you're just testing this as it comes into the plant, right? You're not running around town opening up manholes or anything like that.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's our influence. So yeah, we grab the sample, send it to the state lab. They do the testing, put the results on the website. So
is that a daily test, or can you share how often?
We did for a while. There was a period of about 3 weeks we were doing it daily in January and into February, but it's been since we started, it's been a once a week, and now it's went back to once a week again. So the State Lab of Health got grant funding, and that's why they're doing this research. I don't know how many communities throughout the state are actually contributing to this. There's roughly 30 different communities.
Yep, interested to see how this all shakes out after they get all the data and then analyze the data to see what this really meant in the communities. I mean, still a lot of uncertainty yet. Ron and I were talking about that, and you know, maybe there's somebody that was sick close to the plant. Would that have a bigger impact on the results than somebody at the end of the line? And so a lot we don't know. But
right. I mean, things like, I mean, the higher the solids content, the more gene copies are in it. So there's a lot of things out there. They're still figuring it out. You know, that's how you learn, I guess. You don't always do things correctly or get the right answer the first time, but eventually you get to that point. So.
Ron, thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for doing that.
Yep.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Ron. All right. We are left with
I don't think we need to go into anything else. I think it's 9:30 at night, and we've been here for 3 hours once again. We somehow know how to do these marathons, don't we? You guys do heavy lifting. This is not easy stuff. This is stuff that we don't have to do. You know, these decisions about the hydros and the dams, they've been big decisions here for the last 5 years, and you're making decisions that are going to impact this community for hundreds of years. So it's hard.
All right. I'm fine with that. Let's
Put a
someone
big
wanna,
red bow around it.
yep. Someone I could entertain a motion, but I'm gonna just say it's 9:30. I am going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you for sticking it out, and we'll see you next month, folks. So good
Thank
night.
you, everybody. Appreciate all your work.